And we can start our Q&A session soon, I guess. And I would like to invite all other speakers. We will start from the very beginning, I guess. So this is from our very own faculty member, Ibu Kiki Rizky Sutisna Putri. Thank you for all speakers at this morning's session. I am inspired by what Ibu Nana just presented. When science and technology tend to understand nature, the world, and life itself, art actually moves forward to emphasize its complexity and enhance our perception in some awesomeness like the universe itself. And through our ritual, our fabric, our conception of beauty, the question is how art in this context could bring us back to our local reflection. And I think this can also be answered by Peter, working in the cultural astronomy, how art, science, and technology could enhance our empathetic gesture to our relationship with others as human beings. And can also kind of like be commented by Ibu Anaya, because your latest work kind of like highlights the women behind the astronomy. And yeah, so I guess we're kind of like I would like to invite Ibu Nana first to answer or to comment.
Thank you, Ibu Hari. Thank you, everyone, for the really, really beautiful talk. And thank you for the question. I guess one of the I would say the most important thing is to allow ourselves the time, the attention to look at nature and to look at the universe. And Brett and Peter had shown us the beauty of the astronomical world and seen in various traditional perspectives. And I think there's no judgment in there. This is the nice thing about doing astronomy and looking at the stars. We are so free to perceive, and you can do that in a more scientific manner. You can do that in other ways. You can do that even in virtual context. But it's just allow ourselves to be immersed in the universe, in the heartbeat of the earth. And then from there, it's just ending experience that you will perhaps feel where to go. And Anna, I think, with her works, just I'm overwhelmed with all the beauty, but it's just the way you try to grasp everything, all aspects of astronomy, of the sky, of doing astronomy is unending. So I guess I'll offer that for now. Thank you, Hari.
Thank you, Bu Nana. Maybe Peter, you would like to comment or kind of like give your perspectives on that?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, I think it's a really important point, right? Because astronomy really is a way in which humans can connect, right? Like it doesn't matter, what sort of cultural background or anything that you sort of come from. Like it's human nature essentially to look at the stars, right? And so when you sort of really then begin to open those dialogues and sort of begin to explore those relationships between yourself and your connection to the stars and how that relates to someone else's, then that's how you really can sort of start to build those relationships and all of that. So yeah, I think it's really a sort of an awesome platform for having those conversations and really opening those dialogues.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of like having like a joint attention towards one object and seeing it from different perspective, and gets kind of like what Budana used, like the common denominator. What's like the common denominator from all the different perspectives we are looking at one object and trying to kind of like get all the knowledge. And like that's probably, I don't know how you would comment on the question, Ibu Ana. Is it going to be kind of like like because your latest work also brings in the women in the work in the astronomy?
Yeah, I think for me, and for my practice, since really focusing on astronomy, which emerged after kind of meeting Ibu Nana, I've realized how astronomy can connect so many things together. And I think it is that kind of overarching, profound nature of it, and how it connects like the natural world and humans together. And as you mentioned, it also, and in the question, our relationship with others as human beings, so our relationships with each other as well. And I think in thinking about the women and how they worked together, there's a lot of kind of social science related to that as well, which is drawing another connection there as well. So I think a focus on astronomy can kind of act as an umbrella or a net that connects so many different important things together.
Okay, thank you for the answer. and for your opinions as well. We are going to continue with other questions so that we can have maybe a broader perspective on this before we discuss it further. This is from Rod Bamford, one of our speakers in the afternoon/evening sessions. He said that Peter's talk really highlighted for me the importance of imagination in making sense of our world, so well represented in the stories of the first Australians. And when visual artists collaborate with astronomy to transform highly abstracted imagery, such as the Kepler telescope image Brett showed, I think the same imagination applies in the way an artist interprets that data to assist in communicating ideas and help construct meaning. The technological philosopher Donald Idey uses the term called material hermeneutics as a helpful way of understanding this process. The data or interpretation relationship seems to point to a space where the missing details that Brahmana spoke of in her talk might occur. For me, this confluence also raises the question of how science views such an interpretive process and how we might think about the truth in such imagery in the field of science that highly values proof. Would Bunana, Brad, or Peter perhaps like to comment on this? And I guess this is like one of the interesting way to think about it, because I think being here at the Institut Teknologi Bandung, there's kind of like a big highlight on the search of objective kind of truth. And there's like this push towards science and technology being able to unfold this objective kind of truth. And Bunana, I've already mentioned before earlier, I guess, that the subjectivity plays also a part in science. And I guess that's something that we would like to hear more about in the arts, because the subjectivity is something at also our core. So perhaps you would like to comment, maybe?
But yeah, I'm happy to comment on this if you want. And yeah, like you said, I think the problem really comes down to the idea of science being objective and being an objective observer itself is almost false in its sort of assumptions. And you don't even have to go outside of science to sort of explore that idea. You get that sort of the example within quantum mechanics, right? The idea of the duality of particles and the way a particle behaves depends on the presence or absence of an observer. And so, yeah, I think the problem arises in sort of trying to maintain that idea of objectivity within science. And you have to start, as scientists, really examining your subjectivity and the way in which you view the world through your cultural lens, through your background, through your education, and how that influences the research that you do.
Maybe Bunana would like to add more to it.
Thank you very much for the very interesting question. Of course, astronomy is learning its way the hard way. All the objects, all the phenomena that we study are far away from us. We cannot touch them, let alone control them in a way that perhaps our colleagues in the chemistry lab will do, and repeat their experiments and just vary the parameters as needed. We cannot do that in astronomy. So therefore, from the very beginning, we made ourselves aware that we are so prone to illusion, and even till now, we still use words that like gravitational mirage, and it's a mixture between French and English, where it's part of the effect that Einstein predicted, that we don't see a light source. The source originally emitted their light, and even their position, because of the various effects that gravity plays on the structure of space-time, that the particles of light, even the fastest moving object, had to obey. So in this way, the meaning of truth is something that we always struggle. But of course, the role of science to find the fundamental causal relation put us in a position that we need to put aside our personal perception to really uphold the possible fundamental work of nature, that validity works universally. So it is something that we work. So that makes sciences is tentative. Truth is something that we never achieve. It is something that we keep on working. So I guess in that way, there's optimistic view. There is something that we can always work on, but also there's a cautious reminder all the time that, what you are explaining might be revised in years, and that makes science alive, and that makes everybody's involvement is invited.
Okay, thank you, Bunana. Rod is here. Would you like to give a live comment or confirmations whether or not your the opinions of the speakers have made sense to you?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for your comments. I think it's a really interesting, this space, this intersection between arts and science perspectives on truth and value. I think it's an area at the core of so many contemporary, the struggle and so many contemporary issues, the truth surrounding climate change being, probably the most prominent one. This was mentioned earlier. There's with the COP26 conference currently underway. But one of I think all your comments to me point to the importance of understanding the position of your own point of view in any of assessment of this type, which I think is really sobering. I agree. I think it's absolutely important. And for me, it just coming back to one of the points Brad was making about the idea of communicating this. At some point, our own personal understandings and perhaps our introspections on the way we think about things have to be connected with the way a more general population will understand a concept or an idea. And to me, that is a really, perhaps it intersects in the field of design as much as the visual arts. And I think that, to me, one of the great values of these sorts of collaborations is it does allow that exchange to take place, or can allow that exchange to take place, at that point of intersection, which can be extremely valuable in getting the meaning right.
True. Thank you very much.
There is such a thing as right.
But I guess, like I think the key point, or key word for this is discussion or dialogue. I guess, because I think we keep on forgetting and trying to just like respond this and respond that, but then not kind of letting the dialogue actually happen and seeing or understanding different perspectives. Yeah, it becomes something that actually can enrich rather than just like adding up to, because sometimes when you respond to something, you just keep on adding up, but not really having that deep reflection, collective reflection, and then finding something in common that we can work towards on. Thank you very much for contributing as well, and see you in the evening, Canberra time.
Yes, thank you very much for those talks, everybody. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to move on to the next question. This is from Kai, I guess. Kai is a non-regular student in the Masters of Visual Art. In the past, I was working for Indonesian Planetarium. It's true what Dr. Brad Tucker said, that to understand astronomy, sometimes we need to interpret it using music or color, even exaggerated using CGI. And it happens a lot in planetarium movies. This is another question for Brad, but because Brad is not here, then perhaps, Peter can comment on this. I found some of the movies sometimes only kind of like being made to be nice or good for the eyes, but have no further explanation, especially in scientific methods. Is it still relevant to use this kind of movies, and how do you see it from the scientific and perhaps the art point of view can be kind of commented by Bu Ana? Because I think this is where what Rod has mentioned before, I guess this is a different field of design perhaps that comes into play, because then, like the science communication is partly there or is a part of their field rather than the art field. But I guess, like maybe you can comment as well on that.
I guess from an art point of view, I guess everything in movies and in some art is exaggerated to some way, and it has a role to play in imagination and speculation, and kind of igniting us to be imaginative in visual ways ourselves, I think. But I'm not sure if I have a good answer in terms of science fiction movies. I think it's a really good question. I don't know, Peter, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's like there's certainly still value in the traditional representation of things, but it's more sort of the sort of understanding it and the realization that these objects exist outside of the visual spectrum, right? That there's more understanding to be had from them with the more sort of ways in which we can explore these ideas and these images. And yeah, just like Brad was saying in his talk, that it just is a way of, again, opening up that dialogue and perhaps bringing in someone else's perspective and someone else's sort of background and their strengths, and sort of bringing the conversation in a way that they can then contribute in their way, in a way in which traditionally they may not have been able to contribute. And then again, you're just sort of building that richer and fuller understanding, and that bigger picture, I guess, is what this is all about, right?
And I think also seeing those kind of depictions in popular culture may also inspire people to go and study them from a more scientific perspective, or invent their own artistic methods of depicting them, which also has value.
Okay, yeah. I guess again, there's a very strong highlight on the dialogue or discussion, rather than responding to this is what we have, or this is like the scientific findings, and then please can you visualize this, rather than that, and just like have that kind of discussion flow, and then see it from different perspectives. I do have another question. This is coming from a direct message. This person would like to remain anonymous. They say, as previously stated, the indigenous peoples absorb astronomical knowledge system into their social, cultural, and religious life. Is climate change or light pollution affect their observations of the stars? And if so, what effect can we see in their culture?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a problem, and that's actually sort of a whole segment of my master's work, and it's all about sort of developing policy and procedures around preventing light pollution from affecting those things, and particularly protecting physical, tangible sites that are on country here that have that connection to the stars. And in terms of light pollution, well, to frame it quite frankly, and my other supervisor, Dwayne Hummaker, wrote a paper on this. It's a form of cultural genocide. Light pollution is a form of cultural genocide, because the knowledge that's actually contained within these systems is integral to the survival of our culture, of our people. And so if you're doing something to remove that connection to the sky, remove those dark skies, then you are in turn, preventing that culture from continuing and from surviving. Yeah.
Those are very powerful words, but I think, we need that kind of sobering comment to kind of like see, oh yeah, this is what we're doing, and stop kind of like sugarcoat everything with the beauty of progress and innovations, I guess, technological innovations. And perhaps also, Ibu Nana, we do have similar problems perhaps with the indigenous people living in Indonesia and relying heavily on the stars as well as their way of life.
Yes, that's becoming a widespread challenge for people who revere their spatio-temporal need on the stars, on the constellation, on the regularity of how celestial bodies rise and set. We have heard that some traditional farmers got confused. Okay, this constellation already appeared, but the rain has not started. What's going on? And people who have used the stars to gauge themselves as when to go sailing also get confused, because the weather is so unreliable these days. It's supposed to be rather quiet to go across the sea to another island. It seems like the storms just keep on coming. So it seems like for those people, of course, who probably don't follow closely the issues on global warming, but they feel it. They feel the changes, and the impact is horrendous on them, because they are very local. They rely on the local produce to feed themselves. If it's not fulfilled, then as Peter said, it's not only the daily need, it's not fulfilled, but spiritually the cut off from their relation with the universe, with the stars, with the sky is disturbed. And for me, it is something which is difficult to mend. Relationship, break in relationship is difficult to mend. If you have problem with food, maybe your government would send you supplies, but it's something else. With your relation with the sky is more challenging to keep.
Thank you, Banana. Another sort of, I think, because we tend to try not to see the bad side, or like whatever it is, bad news and on climate change and all that, and just to have that being heard, that small acts actually kind of like affect a bigger community outside of ourselves. I'd like to move on again to another question here from Emily April. I really liked Ibu Nana's talk, and listening to how she continues to try to understand how art, science, and technology contributes to our understanding of the world and space. I was thinking when you were talking about beauty being the common denominator, about the sublime, and artists and scientists trying to understand something beyond what they can conceptualize. I also wanted to ask you, do you think it's only the aesthetic of beauty, perhaps, aesthetic of natural beauty, that is the common denominator of art, science, and technology? Or is there something, maybe perhaps some kind of like teasing out? Please do comment further, Emily, if I get it wrong. Is there maybe something else than aesthetics of beauty that kind of, or natural beauty, that is common denominator of art, science, and technology? Because we do have kind of like different perceptions of beauty in the arts, Bu Nana. One being, natural beauty, and then one is the artistic kind of beauty coming from humans' creativity and all sorts of like critical point of views.
Thank you. That's really a lovely question. Yeah, there is a wide spectrum of what people consider as beautiful, or what is beauty. What I'm trying to share is that there is a natural beauty that people seem to commonly perceive, and it's not just across tradition, but it's just across ages. It's just amazing. All those cave paintings, for example, they depict a lot of things that we still could relate, and that's millennia ago. Another thing is that beauty could perhaps be perceived, I don't know, in my opinion, from the lack thereof. Something which is asymmetrical could sort of catch your attention, and you realize that, wow, that could also be beautiful. And another thing which I put together is in a huge box that I label need, is actually a huge box. And it could be anything from fear, from worry, from the feeling of powerless, hopelessness. In astronomy, we could feel that, because everything that we see seems to control us, and we don't have any way to control them. And for example, if people living in the deep winter, for example, they need a little bit of warmth, they can't do anything to move the sun to their delight. So it is something that humbling experience, and we feel that. So I guess that's what I'm trying to express with very simple word of need, because need seems to relate us even deeper, and we could connect. And if I feel your need, we may do something together. But if I just feel my need is not your need, vice versa, it's hard. But if I could feel your need, you could feel my need, there is a pavement that we could build between us.
Yeah, I think I'm reminded as well. There's a concept by Dennis Sutton talking about beauty and the instincts, and what you have said really kind of like made sense. That while he sort of argued that we do have that instinctual need towards beauty, and not only because perhaps sociologists would kind of like argue that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's sort of like very culturally, influenced. But then there's like the need, or just like the universal response of aesthetic experience, I guess, that kind of like perhaps would be in line to what Bu Nana would say. I mean, like, who wouldn't kind of like be in awe when, seeing like the sun rising from the east, or the sun setting on the west, like in the west, that's sort of like aesthetic experience is universal for everyone, I guess, in living on Earth. Thank you very much also for the question, Emily, and I'm going forward to the next question by Pak Chai Tanya Sambrani. He said it would be great to hear from Bu Nana about the relationship between modern science and traditional ways of understanding astronomical phenomena in Indonesia. Is it already integrated perhaps in the studies in the astronomy department, for example, or how is it right now?
Thank you very much, Chaitanya, for the question. I don't think it is quite formally integrated or recognized in curriculum, but some of us got very interested in studying the traditional way of perceiving the celestial bodies. Let's put it traditional astronomy, because it's been a reliable tool in moving forward in all civilizations. And Peter mentioned about various folk tales about it. It's interesting that there is a particular work organized by the International Astronomical Union, particularly work on relating the folk stories that relate to the stars. And it's important as one method to see how human beings spread all over the world by just seeing how related their stories are. And that also comes in language. And that also in how they use astronomy to guide themselves through life. So there must be something very valuable in there that we in modern civilization would benefit from relearning those. In particular, in how the traditional knowledge really uphold the importance of sustainability. They don't have that kind of word, but now we know that that's what they mean by keeping things, in small scale and not over harvest. And I guess there is something that we learn in hindsight and what our ancestors had already practiced. So I believe there is an importance to relearn or listen, perhaps to revive some of the traditional practices. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to perhaps invite Pak Chaitanya to respond to the comment or to the answer of Ibu Nana.
Thank you very much, Ibu Nana. It was really generous and wonderful that you responded to my question in this fashion, because it's a question that many of us in Australia and in other parts of Asia are deeply concerned with. The relationship between the way our ancestors dealt with the world of phenomena, the way our ancestors dealt with the world of science in many different ways, and what we have learned within the university system don't always agree with each other. In many Asian countries and in terms of the experience of First Nations people in Australia, there is a difference between the so-called modern science and the knowledge that we inherit in different ways. And I think this is, it's so wonderful to have this opportunity to hear you alongside Brad and Peter and Anna to reflect on some of these questions. And so I very much wanted to sort of convey a note of great appreciation for all of these presentations as well, and to mark the importance of this question. It's such a central question for many of us as we are faced with kind of existential threats to the nature of the world as we understand it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Chaitanya, for your commentaries as well. It's 11 a.m. In Bandung right now, so we do have around 9 more minutes for the discussion. I'm gonna go forward to another question by Gandhi Eka, a student at Master's Program in Individual Art. I want to ask the speakers, what do you think of a scientific point of view regarding another perspective of the universe? This is very interesting, namely the idea of a flat Earth and how about the developments of other creatures outside the planet Earth, or UFOs that are seen objectively in science and technology until now, because considering many works of art, comics, films inspired by things like this. Thank you for your attention and answer. This is very interesting. I don't think Gandhi Eka is the only person kind of like curious about this at this moment. So maybe Peter or Bu Nana would like to start.
Yeah, so the flat Earth one it's a really hard one to touch from a like a scientific perspective, just because the way in which we understand science and the way in which we observe the idea of a flat Earth doesn't make sense. And so trying to talk about that in any sort of I guess scientific way is a difficult, it's a common problem across sort of that people like Brad are trying to solve, right, with the idea of science communication, and sort of really the way in which we talk about science and we sort of represent science in the general public has a huge bearing on the way in which we as scientists are perceived and how trusted scientific institutions are, right? So and so I think that's a big part of what Brad does, and the idea of opening these dialogues between cultures and people and making those connections like we've spoken about. Because if you make a connection with someone, then you are more likely to see their point of view and be able to come to some sort of understanding as to maybe not objective truths, but at least, relative truths and those sort of ideas. The idea of aliens is one of my favorite questions. We get asked that one all the time. The idea, it depends on what you mean also by an alien creature. I think, it's not far-fetched to believe that we might find life on another planet within our solar system before this decade's out. With the work that's going on, in the places like Enceladus and those sort of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, even the work that's happening at Mars, like finding water beneath the surface of Mars and all the rovers and stuff like that. It's not unreasonable, but it's not going to be ET-like. It's going to be microbial, bacterial, something like that. But I think it's very possible that by 2030 we could see something like that on a body that isn't Earth, and that doesn't actually come from Earth. So I think that's fairly reasonable to think at this point. Yeah.
What about you, Bunana? What's your favorite question about astronomy from popular belief?
Dear God, but thank you. I think yes, we need to address this as a collaborative effort. Number one, from scientific point of view, well, the flat Earth situation, we've got evidence on the contrary to the flat Earth. It's a hard evidence that we are not living on a flat Earth. But there are also, there's confirmed scientific statement about that. But regarding aliens, as Peter said, we are not there yet to confirm. We are still working on searching, on identifying, life is something very, very simple to anything intelligent, perhaps way more intelligent than us, but we are not there yet to confirm. But it's still an open area of research. But as for this flat Earth business, it's something that I think would perhaps be a place that we could apply this bridging that I mentioned as far, because what this group of people want is not evidence. There's more than enough evidence to show that the Earth is not flat. But obviously, this is not what they want. We don't know what they want. So I'm thinking this is for Anna and all the artists to approach them in ways that scientists have not been able to do, through their heart, through their, through their other dimensions in their mind.
Would you like to comment, Ibu Anna,
yes,
about
so
that?
I guess that's for you, Anna.
I think the role of art in this area is kind of providing that space for speculation and that space for imagination, and being able to kind of be really playful with these ideas as a space to form unpredictable answers and inventive, and kind of invent these own stories and leave the actual facts to the scientists.
Thank you. So perhaps, maybe then as Bu Nana would, mention, then we would know, or the scientists would know what they wanted, from science, and science can kind of come in again with data, with facts or scientific knowledge about that. It has been a really interesting discussion, and we do have one more question, but I don't think we have the time, because I would like to maybe invite the afternoon/evening session speakers. There's Pak Rod before, and there's Ibu Erika, and then there's also Pak Tisna. If you would like to kind of like say hi to our audience as well.
Hello, everyone. It's been really wonderful listening to these incredible talks. It doesn't matter how many times I've listened to my own colleagues, I learn something new every time. And Ibu Nana, that's such a beautiful talk. You're really inspiring with your outlook and your perspectives. And I'm really looking forward to responding to the themes that were discussed today. And I think, you know, it's really interesting that you're talking about the idea of the imagination and whether that's arts or sciences. But I think what's really interesting, and this is what I'll talk about in my talk this afternoon, is that both artists and scientists have questions, very similar questions, but perhaps have different objectives in terms of their outcomes. But there is this incredible crossover between both, that we are all human, as Ibu Nana has really thought about, and also Peter, you know, this idea of the universal idea of our own world, and it's our curiosity and our wanting to understand it that creates our stories and creates these imaginative spaces as well. But science doesn't just answer questions and take away that mystery. Science adds to that mystery. And I think that's why a lot of artists really love science, is because even though you're getting to the bottom of things and we're understanding molecular structures and atomic structures, and then we're looking out into space and we can understand that these formations that we see from Earth have this incredible depth and they create this other world. It doesn't take away the meaningfulness about who we are as people. And I think that's where we all come together, is celebrating those exchanges of curiosity and wonder. And it's wonder that drives us forward. And it's that wonder that will also help us combat climate change and bring us together to want to combat climate change, particularly on this auspicious week where the Glasgow Climate Conference is being held. And I think there are so many wonderful things that as a community of scholars, we can all come together and discuss. And I've learned so much today. So thank you to the speakers, and I look forward to responding this afternoon.
Thank you, Bu Erika. Pak Tisna.
Ya, alhamdulillah ya. Thank you very much to all participants this morning. Very interesting people. I believe Ibu Nana of Bosha ITB, Ibu Ana, Pak Peter Swanton ya. Saya lihat ini Pak Brad Tucker, Pak Rod, and Ibu Erika of NU Canberra. I hope we can collaborate forever for more healthy and peaceful world of today and the future. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Dankeschön.
Thank you. So that's an introduction, introduction of our speakers for this afternoon/evening. And I'm afraid we have to end the morning session for a lunch break or maybe a tea time break in Canberra. Be sure to come back again for the afternoon/evening session, where we're going to discuss other multidisciplinary arts practices by Indonesian and Australian artists. Thank you for your kind attention since the opening, and see you again on 1 p.m. Western Indonesian time or 5 p.m. Canberra time. Have a good break.
So for the first session, in the second session, I would like to invite Pak Dr. Tisna Sanjaya and also Pak Syaiful Garibaldi. So without further ado, I will introduce Pak Tisna. Almost all new Pak Tisna. Well, Tisna, well-known artist in Indonesia and I think abroad as well. He majoring in printmaking in ITB. Actually, now is head of visual art research group. And Pak Tisna already exhibit his work everywhere, almost all around the globe, in many of exhibition, group exhibition and solo exhibition. We know Pak Tisna as also an activist. Yeah, in Bandung, Pak Tisna also known as Kabayan, figures of traditional Sundanese. most Bandung people knew Pak Tisna as Kabayan. So whenever Pak Tisna go in the city or meet people, Bandung people, they will call Kabayan, not Pak Tisna. One times I've heard, I saw an event when Pak Tisna wrote his signature, on something on wall. I think, if I'm not mistaken, when Pak Tisna wrote his signature Tisna, everyone just like, who is Tisna? And then Pak Tisna changed to Kabayan, not one of Pak Tisna. And also Pak Tisna awarded by the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy of Indonesia with Adikarya in 2014, and lately he awarded like a cultural award of the nation. Okay, that's too much. If I introduce Pak Tisna, there will be a long introduction, probably until 8 p.m. So Pak Tisna will present today with bahasa Indonesia, Pak Tisna,
Ya, bahasa Indonesia campur Sunda.
So please, Pak Tisna, and after Pak Tisna, I will introduce Pak Syaiful Garibaldi next. Please, Pak Tisna, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Pak Willy, thank you very much to all participants. Very interesting people, I believe it. Terima kasih, saya akan presentasi dalam bahasa Indonesia ya. Mohon maaf karena saya setiap hari Rabu itu puasa bicara bahasa Inggris. Jadi saya bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia. Terima kasih, saya akan menyampaikan presentasi saya secara visual apa yang beberapa karya saja, terutama di masa pandemi ya. Jadi temanya seni penjernih air. Ibu di sini imah budaya Cigonewa. Jadi seni adalah doa. Yang akan saya presentasikan adalah model penciptaan karya seni kolaborasi yang bermanfaat insya Allah untuk lingkungan. Kolaborasi ini antara lain dengan Profesor IGD Wenten dari ITB dan Profesor Yahdi Jaim juga dari ITB ya. Juga dengan berbagai kalangan, tidak hanya dengan para ilmuwan dari kampus saja, tapi juga dari luar ITB dengan warga, dengan berbagai kalangan. Saya akan perlihatkan beberapa metode penciptaan karya seni. Nah, saya ketika pandemi COVID-19 ini ini merupakan tantangan kreativitas. Imajinasi, inovasi untuk bekerja sama, kolaborasi, menciptakan karya yang bermanfaat untuk tujuannya adalah keselamatan lingkungan. Jadi kalau lingkungan selamat, maka itulah estetik, itulah etik, itu ada nilai-nilai pedagogik. Itu yang saya pelajari dari selama saya sekolah di kampus-kampus ITB maupun di luar. Saya latar belakangnya seorang pografis, saya belajar seni grafis S1 di ITB, S2 di Hochschule für Bildende Kunst Braunschweig di Jerman, dan S3 di ISI Yogyakarta. Saya banyak membuat karya-karya grafis, terutama teknik medianya etsa, aquatin, dry point, dan medium-medium yang memakai teknik cetak dalam seperti ini. Tapi pemahaman saya tentang seni grafis tidak hanya teknik saja yang hubungannya dengan mesin dan berbagai hal yang hubungan teknis. Tapi setelah terus saya renungkan bertahun-tahun, saya cetak, ternyata ada hal yang spiritual di dalamnya. Baik medium, seni grafis, maupun prosesnya, dan juga nilai-nilai yang ada di dalamnya. Ini ketika saya residensi di Australia, di RMIT Melbourne. Saya 1 bulan di sana, kontemplasi di mesin-mesin yang ada di sana sambil berdoa untuk nilai-nilai perdamaian. Saya mencetak tidak hanya dengan plat-plat tembaga atau mesin ini, tapi juga mesin-mesinnya adalah tubuh. Jadi saya tidak hanya memanggul mesin-mesin yang ada dari Jerman atau dari Jepang dan sebagainya, itu adalah pelajaran-pelajaran secara formal. Tapi ketika saya lihat di alam, lihat berbagai hal yang ada di alam, juga saya renungkan tubuh adalah, raga adalah, jiwa adalah mesin itu sendiri yang bisa bernafas, bisa berdoa dan sebagainya. Jadi tubuh saya sebagai mesin. Mediumnya tentu saja dipilih ya, yang dari alam. Ada rempah-rempah seperti kunyit, jahe, tumbukan-tumbukan jerami, padi yang berlimpah di alam kita. Ini di atas sajadah sebagai sebuah doa, permohonan maaf atas segala sesuatu kekeliruan yang ada di dalam lingkungan kita. Nah, ini metodenya model seni penjernih air yang akan saya presentasikan tuh doa tanah, dian lentera budaya, dan mural Sungai Citarum. Ada 4 yang akan saya presentasikan hari ini, yaitu di Cigondewa. Ceritanya begini, jadi saya membuat karya di Cigondewa. Di atas lahan tanah ini berdiri imah budaya pada tahun 2007 di Desa Cigondewa. Di sini banyak tanah warga yang dijual. Karena tanah-tanah ini tuh dulunya waktu saya kecil ini berlimpah ya. Ini berlimpah padi, sungainya sangat jernih, juga warganya penuh dengan gotong royong. Di sini tuh berasnya beras yang sangat terkenal yaitu hawara gelis. Jadi bahasa Indonesianya suara cantik. Di desa orang tua saya ini seperti desa-desa lain penghasil beras dan hasil tani organik. Banyak sekali lumbung-lumbung. Lumbung-lumbung di sini itu lumbung-lumbung padi. Jika musim panen tiba, warga selalu saling berbagi hasil panen dan tumbuh tradisi karakter sikap hidup gotong royong, kolaborasi, saling tolong-menolong, mengalir seperti air. Singkat cerita, terjadi perubahan. Entah kapan mulainya, tiba-tiba kita lengah dan berubah dari desa organik yang sintetik ya menjadi desa yang penuh dengan sampah seperti ini. Nah, ini di tepi sungai ya, sungai yang indah di sebelahnya itu. Nah, saya tidak marah, tidak memaki-maki negeri. Saya tercinta ya, ini tanah Karuhun. Tapi saya mencoba mencari cara dengan energi spirit seni. Yaitu seni punya daya untuk perubahan. Maka saya membangun di desa yang pernah indah dan berubah jadi rusak. Di sini 530 meter persegi saya tukar dengan lukisan dari pemiliknya yaitu Pak Ignatius Sunario. Terus syukuran karena tanah leluhur dapat lagi maka harus bersyukur. Mengadakan hamil ya bareng-bareng bersama warga untuk membangun imah budaya Cigondewa. Terus saya transparan terhadap warga mau membangun ini. Mereka menyangkanya saya mau membangun pabrik plastik, padahal saya mau membangun ruang imah budaya. Di sini asalnya gersang, penuh sampah, dibersihkan bersama para pembimbing, Profesor Dwi Marianto, S3 ya, pembimbing S3 saya, Profesor Setiawan Sabana, bersama warga. Ditanamin lama-lama yang tempat sampah itu berubah ya, sekarang banyak pohon di sana. Jadi ada energi baik dari seni itu yang bisa kita tumbuhkan karena pohonnya sekarang bertambah terus, sudah menyaring bertahun-tahun ya, maka airnya juga jadi jernih seperti ini. Nah tapi ini belum bisa diminum, ini masih ekspresi seni ya yang saya miliki. Saya harus kolaborasi dengan ahli air yaitu Pak Profesor Dr. Wenten. Nah, maka dari itu besok akan hadir ya, tim Pak Wenten itu mau mengeksplorasi supaya ini lebih bermanfaat. Jadi ruang ini menjadi ruang yang menyenangkan ya, suka banyak orang yang datang. Jadi seni itu punya daya untuk tidak hanya estetik secara formal saja, tapi bisa ngumpul, bisa ngawangkong bareng dan sebagainya serta gotong royong. Juga warga di sini bisa jadi tempat untuk seni tradisi. Juga para pejabat ya datang ke sana untuk ngomong politik, ngomong berbagai hal. Jadi ruang ini ruang yang sangat merdeka, terbuka untuk apa saja, untuk siapa saja. Dan ini di halaman imah budaya itu ada sungai. Sungainya sangat kotor, berlimpah dengan limbah-limbah industri terutama dan limbah warga. Tapi kita selalu mengadakan performance art di sini. Ini teman-teman seniman ya dari kelas Ajag. Menyampaikan seninya ditonton oleh warga, oleh para pemangku kekuasaan di sana, RT, RW, lurah dan sebagainya supaya ada dari seni itu bisa menunjukkan ada kotor di sini. Nah, tapi tidak hanya itu, kita harus ada gerakan lain, yaitu membuat kincir. Ya. Saya membuat kincir, kolaborasi dengan Dirjen Kebudayaan, mereka tertarik untuk apa yang saya lakukan itu, juga dengan Pak Wenten, dengan Pak Asmujo, ya sebagai kurator untuk ikut menata ini, dengan berbagai, terutama warga di sana.
Beginilah kondisi sungai di kawasan Cigondewa, Kota Bandung, yang sudah mulai tercemar oleh limbah pabrik dan sampah. Kondisi ini berdampak terhadap warga sekitar sungai. Mereka mulai kekurangan air bersih untuk keperluan sehari-hari. Prihatin dengan kondisi ini, seniman lukis asal Kota Bandung, Tisna Sanjaya, membuat inovasi seni penjernih air. Cara kerja dari seni penjernih air ini adalah mengubah air sungai menjadi jernih dengan beberapa tahapan. Dari kincir air dialirkan ke bak penampungan, lalu ditampung ke penyaringan yang sudah rancang untuk menjernihkan air. Pembuatan kincir penjernih air ini bekerja sama dengan berbagai pihak, salah satunya dengan arsitek ITB.
Idenya sih dari karena saya sering ke sini, saya tempatkan di sini, jadi saya melihat bahwa air yang di sebelah itu tuh berlimpah dan saya ingin ini tuh bermanfaat baik untuk masyarakat, buat pohon, buat ikan dan sebagainya.
Dengan adanya kincir penjernih air ini disambut baik oleh warga sekitar. Kini air sungai yang tadinya kotor dapat dipergunakan oleh warga.
Yang banyak sekali bahan-bahan kimia atau kotor apa. Ini sebuah pelajaran kincir ini. Yang mana jangan membuang sampah sembarangan. Jangan membuang sampah ke sungai. Karena manfaat air ini bisa dirasakan oleh warga masyarakat Cigondewa secara khusus, secara umum mungkin lebih luas.
Seni kincir penjernih air ini banyak membawa manfaat bagi keberlangsungan hidup warga sekitar. Di samping itu, masyarakat diharapkan bisa menjaga lingkungan seperti tidak membuang sampah ke sungai. Sunandar, Kompas TV, Bandung, Jawa Barat.
Nah, jadi dari yang sampah tadi sekarang jadi tempat yang lebih baik lah. Anak-anak bisa bermain di situ. Jadi air sekarang berlimpah. Tapi sekarang karena musim banjir ya, jadi kincirnya diistirahatkan dulu, ditaekin. Karena banyak limbah yang membuang dari sana, nempel-nempel di kincir. Tapi nanti insya Allah akan dipasang lagi. Juga untuk seni berikutnya, karena kalau lingkungan bersih juga terutama buat anak-anak, karena di situ tuh berubah jadi daerah industri ya, industrinya juga plastik bekas. Tapi saya tidak menakut-nakuti warga dan anak-anak, tapi si sampah plastik itu juga dieksplorasi, disatukan dalam sebuah kanvas atau kertas untuk didekati, karena mereka itu kan hidup di daerah itu. Nah, tapi dicampur dengan bahan-bahan alam, dengan tanah dan sebagainya. Sehingga mereka itu belajar, ini tuh ada proses perubahan menjadi daerah sintetik antara lain. Tapi harus dijaga lingkungan hidup itu dengan baik. Nah, juga pendekatan saya terhadap proses perubahan lumbung-lumbung padi menjadi lumbung plastik ya. Dan kain ini jadi lumbung plastik di sana tuh. Jadi saya pameran di sana. Ini karya-karya saya dipamerkan di lumbung-lumbung plastik. Jadi saya tidak melakukan perlawanan ya secara frontal, tapi justru mendekati mereka secara damai karena ada proses perubahan. Nanti step by step kalau menurut saya. Yang ketiga Citarum. Citarum itu adalah sungai itu, air itu adalah anugerah. Tapi karena tidak bisa mengelola jadi bencana. Jadi bencana seperti ini. Ini juga harus kerjasama ya, berbagai pihak. Di satu sisi kaki saya yang satu secara estetik mengolah secara visual, membuat etsa, lukisan, grafis untuk dana ya, dana kalau dijual untuk mengoperasikan seni-seni instalasi, performance art dan seni lingkungan, seni kolaborasi. Tapi di sisi lain kaki yang saya satu lagi harus mampu bergotong royong, ngobrol, diskusi, mencari solusi dengan berbagai kalangan, yang berbagai latar belakang yang berbeda. Dengan tentara, dengan warga, dan sebagainya. Apa yang bisa saya lakukan? Tentu saja saya sangat spesifik ilmu saya itu. Karena saya mengajar di seni rupa, seni grafis, ya, seni instalasi, performer art, seni desain dan lingkungan. Jadi ilmu-ilmu yang di kampus saya bawa ke sini bersama mahasiswa. Saya ajak juga ke sini. Juga para santri, ya ustadz saya ikutkan menggambar, melukis di sini supaya teks-teks agama itu kontekstual dengan kehidupan lingkungan, tidak hanya berdiri sendiri. Ini air doa dari Citarum ya dibawa ke sini. Nah ini lukisannya, dari lukisan ini jadi idenya saya bawa ke National Gallery Australia. Waktu itu di NGA bentuknya seperti ini, jadi instalasi. Ya. Instalasi saya performance art dengan Pak Caitanya waktu itu. Ya, Bapak Caitanya Sambrani, saya ajak untuk masuk ke stage panggung ini untuk bicara tentang Pancasila, tentang berbagai hal yang dia bisa melihat dari luar, tentang Indonesia, bagaimana Indonesia itu secara kultur dan budaya. Ini bahan-bahannya tidak hanya cat, tapi juga alam yang ada di sekitar Citarum itu. Juga karena saya sebagai Sikabayan, ini penting sekali. Saya jadi semua media saya masuki ya, hampir semua, yaitu televisi, seni instalasi, performance art, seni grafis, seni lukis, seni keseharian dan sebagainya. Kenapa? Karena saya dosen. Saya pengabdi negara ya, saya akan berhubungan terus dengan mahasiswa, dengan dosen yang baru, mahasiswa-mahasiswa baru. Jadi saya harus banyak metode penciptaan karya seni, sehingga saya tidak stagnan sebagai seniman atau sebagai guru. Ini juga bersama warga di sana yang kebanjiran. Jadi banjir itu bukan bencana sebetulnya kalau kita mau menatanya. Nah, yang harus didekati antara lain anak-anak dengan lumpur-lumpurnya secara psikologis supaya mereka mencintai tanah, lumpur, dan air di sekitar itu. Nah, juga dengan para pejabat ya, saya ajak untuk melukis di dinding ini. Ini ada Pak Ridwan Kamil, gubernur dan kepolisian semua. Warga juga ikut di sini. Jadi ini bukan karya seniman saja. Kita nggak bisa kerja sendiri untuk menciptakan karya lingkungan lebih baik. Harus semua gotong royong. Alhamdulillah jadi bersih. Meskipun sekarang masih terus ya. Ada yang mengotori dan sebagainya, tapi kita jangan menyerah, terus harus berkarya di sana. Jadi tidak mungkin untuk karya-karya seperti ini tuh di lingkungan itu kerja sendiri. Harus semua bersabar, gotong royong untuk menciptakan lingkungan kita lebih baik. Ini di Jatiwangi. Di Jatiwangi saya diundang oleh Arif Yudi dan kawan-kawan karena di Jatiwangi ini itu sekarang jadi magnet para pengusaha industri datang ke sini karena ada airport ya, Kertajati. Nah, si tanah-tanah terakota ini, penghasil terakota ini tuh sudah dibeli, sudah dipatok-patok ya akan jadi pabrik. Jadi jangan sampai lengah, rusak seperti yang kejadian di tempat saya itu di Cigonewa. Jadi ini bagus sekali teman-teman di Jatiwangi itu membuat dari awal membuat kolaborasi seni-seni yang pendekatan terhadap berbagai pihak supaya tanahnya tetap terjaga sebagai tanah terakota, kota terakota. Industri boleh berkembang, boleh maju, tapi tetap tradisi kita, kearifan lokal kita harus dijaga. Nah, itu harus dari awal. Maka saya berkarya di sini bersama kurator, bersama Arif Yudi dan sebagainya. Dan bahannya itu sangat berlimpah untuk mencetak tuh. Yaitu dari jerami-jerami yang ada di sana. Dari sini, dari rempah-rempah, dari ini rempah-rempah juga, serbuk jahe, bahkan karedok lenca, ya, jengkol, pete, saya jadikan medium untuk berkarya seni. Dan yang menarik, yang sangat sublim adalah mediumnya. Bahannya itu dari samping. Ada 33 samping yang saya dapat antara lain dari ibu saya. Ibu saya mendoakan supaya karya seni ini tuh bermanfaat, selalu berada di jalan Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Itu doanya itu. Jangan lupa bacakan sholawat nariyah. Dia selalu mengajarkan ilmu. Allahumma sholli sholatan kamilatan wassalim salaman taman. Mun rek nanaon kudu dibacakeun eta entisan. Harus baca itu doa. Jadi semua agama punya doa, punya keyakinan, punya keimanan. Tidak hanya Islam saja, semua. Kita harus gotong royong membangun menata lingkungan yang tadi itu yang disampaikan oleh teman-teman di pembicaraan sebelumnya ya, bagaimana perubahan iklim ini akan terjadi. Nah, kita dari gerakan-gerakan kecil ini, kita harus juga ikut berkarya. Ini samping-samping dilabur dengan bahan-bahan alam, lalu dicetak di atas. Ini ada 33 dari zikir ya. Sebetulnya 99 dari Asmaul Husna, tapi saya jadi 33 karena 33 ruangnya terlalu sempit, jadi 33. Dan tubuh warga Jebor di sana berkolaborasi dengan kita cetak, dan ini hasilnya ada 33 cetakan kolaborasi bersama warga. Mesinnya adalah mesin yang bisa hidup dari tubuh-tubuh warga, jiwa-jiwa warga. Dan setelah selesai dibawa ke ruang publik. Kalau ini ruang otonom, ruang personal ya, semacam apa ya, di ruang zikir yang sublim di sini tuh. Sesudah dari sini dibawa ke ruang publik untuk didiskusikan tentang tanah ini bagaimana. Jadi seni sebagai jembatan untuk menyampaikan gagasan-gagasan supaya kita waspada ya, awas. Nah, tapi karena seni punya nilai-nilai kedamaian, tidak dengan cara-cara kekerasan atau melawan perubahan ini. Tapi bagaimana dengan cara seni supaya ini yang di dalamnya itu tanah-tanah dari warga yang di dalam itu. Ini tanah-tanah dari warga, kiriman dari komunitas-komunitas budaya di Kota Bandung maupun di Jatiwangi. Terus ini sarung dari warga juga, ini biasanya dipakai oleh laki-laki. Dan ini samping ini yang biasa dipakai oleh perempuan. Jadi laki-laki dan perempuan saling menyangga kehidupan. Ini untuk alam, saling menyangga alamnya. Jadi ada persoalan yang keseimbangan. Dan ini bola dunia ya. Ini golnya karena ini saya namakan stadion sepak bola organik. Stadion sepak bola organik luasnya hampir 40 kali 60 meter di tengah sawah yang tanah ini sudah dimiliki oleh seniman-seniman budayawan dari Jatiwangi untuk melakukan perlawanan secara damai terhadap proses perubahan itu. Ini kepala desa, kepala dusun, Kadus Ila. Si Kadus ini saya cetak ya tubuhnya untuk menjadi simbol ya, pemimpin yang bareng-bareng bersama warga. Ini konsepnya karena saya seni rupa, grafis, saya juga mengajar 2 dimensi, tapi grafisnya saya lebarkan menjadi peristiwa kebudayaan. Ini tanah-tanah dari warga yang dikumpulkan dari Kota Bandung maupun dari Jatiwangi dipersatukan. Ini jadi peristiwa yang sangat personal tadi, otonom tadi, grafis di ruang yang sangat pribadi, ketika dilebarkan menjadi peristiwa kebudayaan, menjadi peristiwa bersama. Nah, di sini sangat penting diskusi pada waktu itu karena hadir berbagai kalangan ke sini, tidak hanya seniman saja, tapi ada pejabat, ada wakil bupati, ada juga wakil pengusaha, pemerintah, kurator, dan sebagainya. Jadi estetika yang saya sampaikan di sini adalah estetika bersama, ya, warga, bareng-bareng, kolektif, dan kolaborasi. Saya kira tradisi seperti ini sebetulnya yang sudah pernah tumbuh, yang sedang tumbuh sebetulnya dalam seni tradisi kita. Misalnya contohnya wayang golek, reak, beringbrung, ronggeng gunung, dan sebagainya. Banyak seni-seni tradisi itu memang energinya seperti ini, bareng-bareng untuk menciptakan karya seni bersama. Termasuk seni-seni tradisi yang ada di seluruh dunia juga seperti itu, universal, sama-sama membangun untuk peradaban. Dan kegembiraan tentu saja, kegembiraan dari yang harus kita ciptakan. Tentu saja dengan prokes ya, ini memakai masker sebetulnya sepak bolanya. Ini Arif Yudi yang punya hajat, ini kuratornya, Ismail Muntaha, ini Hafiz Rancajale, dan ini warga, dan sebagainya. Dan insya Allah oleh kurator ini tuh akan dibawa ya bareng-bareng dengan JAP ke Dokumenta untuk menyampaikan hal yang sama sebetulnya di seluruh dunia ya, persoalan tanah, doa untuk tanah itu tidak hanya di kita saja, ada persoalan dengan bumi ini. Dan nanti insya Allah di Dokumenta itu saya akan meminta dikirim tanah dari berbagai macam negara, dari Argentina, dari Afghanistan, dari berbagai kita kumpulkan dalam sebuah perhelatan, cetak tubuh, dan sebagai doa. Tentu saja tanah sebagai simbol ya. Ini menyampaikan kredo, sikap tentang seni yang berada di ruang publik. Juga ini ada sebuah bangunan indah di Kota Bandung, di pusat kota ya. Saya sering menggambar di era pandemi ini sendiri, sepi, lebih kontemplatif, dan menemukan ruang yang indah tempat saya dulu menonton di situ tuh, tempat kebudayaan, ada lengah juga ya, tempat kebudayaan yang lengah sehingga rusak seperti ini. Kita membuat pameran di sini bersama Agung Hujatnika Jenong sebagai kurator dan kawan-kawan, dan ngajak bebersih warga di sana. Alhamdulillah jadi bersih, dari kotor menjadi bersih, dan sampah-sampahnya saya kumpulkan. Ini a gift ya, kado untuk Kota Bandung. Dan alhamdulillah ketika ada pameran itu wali kota datang untuk berdiskusi tentang bagaimana ini ke depannya gedung ini sebetulnya. Dan juga sebetulnya semua itu ketika kita menyampaikan secara estetik ya dan damai, mereka itu akan juga tertarik energinya itu. Ini para pengusaha datang, ada wakil wali kota, ada para inohong Bandung untuk merancang ya supaya ini menjadi imah budaya Kota Bandung. Ini saya ajak performer kontemplasi tentang perenungan terhadap pandemi. Pandemi itu tidak jauh sebetulnya ada di sekitar kita. Antara lain di gedung ini, di sungai dan lain-lain. Ini ada Profesor Setiawan Sabana dan Profesor Yasraf hadir ke sana. Ada juga yang memilikinya ya dulu ini dari Wiranata Kusuma karena beliau waktu itu nenek moyangnya itu adalah pendiri kota ini dan juga bangunan ini pada zaman Belanda tahun 30 ketika Wolf Schumacher. Jadi semuanya saya dekati ya, baik yang para pendirinya, penguasanya, budayawannya, termasuk pusat-pusat kebudayaan yang ada di Kota Bandung seperti Goethe Institute, CCF dan sebagainya. Karena ini masalah bersama, duduk bersama. Juga warga tentu saja yang ngagegeh di sekitar itu. Nah, untuk apa? Untuk masa depan ya, anak-anak kita, cucu kita. Jadi kita membuat basisnya, infrastrukturnya, ekosistemnya supaya anak-anak kita ke depan tinggal menjalankannya dengan baik. Nah, ini sudah disosialisasikan di MUS Museum Singapura, ya, udah di Venice Biennale juga diundang. Ini ada medium lokal ya, jengkol saya bawa ke sana. Ini juga di NGA Canberra seperti yang saya sampaikan tadi, ya, tema tentang persoalan lingkungan itu. Saya kolaborasi dengan antara lain dengan Pak Caitanya Sambrani ya di NGA 3 tahun yang lalu. Ini juga doa kora-kora di Biennale Jogja, ini di Venice Biennale, dan intinya adalah seni adalah doa. Seni adalah doa. Doa yang seperti apa? Tentu saja Bapak Ibu sekalian, saudara-saudara punya doa masing-masing. Yang penting harus punya tujuan yang jelas, komitmen, kebersamaan, dan sosialisasi seperti hari ini, ya, diskusi webinar ini. Terima kasih yang baik dari Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, yang buruk dari saya dan Pak Willy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Pak Tisna. I will introduce our next speakers, young artist from Indonesia, Syaiful Garibaldi. Was born in Jakarta in 1985. He lives and works in Bandung. Syaiful graduated from Visual Art Bachelor Program majoring in printmaking. At the moment, he finishing his master study in environmental science in Universitas Indonesia. Yeah. So Syaiful Garibaldi also exhibit his works in everywhere. His last solo exhibition in 2020 was in Silver Lines Gallery in Manila in 2021, along with some scientists. Syaiful Garibaldi, also well known as TEPU, established foundation Yayasan Lokus Seni and Science in Bandung. Okay, Syaiful, I will hand the screen to you.
Terima kasih Pak Willy dan semua peserta yang hadir pada siang kali ini. Izin saya melanjutkan presentasi dari Pak Tisna. Saya juga presentasi dalam bahasa Indonesia ya, tidak apa-apa ya. Sebelumnya dari Pak Tisna saya sangat mengagumi beliau sebagai dosen saya karena saya juga merupakan lulusan dari seni grafis dan diajar oleh Pak Sanjaya, dan bagaimana beliau sangat menginspirasi ya seperti itu ketika kita menjadi sebagai seorang mahasiswa. Ya, beliau membuka kita banyak akan bentuk-bentuk dari seni, bahasa-bahasa visual baru dari seni. Mungkin juga dari sana karena ketika itu di seni grafis kita dibebaskan dalam menggunakan material, banyak pilihan. Mungkin dari sana terbesit banyak eksperimen-eksperimen yang dimulai sehingga bisa berlanjut ke dalam kekaryaan kayak saya saat ini seperti itu. Menarik tadi terkait pembahasan tentang isu lingkungan. Saya sangat sepakat dengan sampaian dari beliau bagaimana sebuah isu lingkungan itu kita harus menghadapinya atau melihatnya dari berbagai macam angle. Kita harus melihat dari sudut pandang yang sangat holistik dan tentunya kerjasama dari beragam disiplin. Karenanya ketika saya masuk ke ilmu sains, di ilmu sains pun mereka harus menerima sosok alumni dari seni, karena di situ harapannya bagaimana seni atau karya-karya seni, seniman dan kawan-kawan dari budaya ikut banyak berkontribusi terhadap permasalahan lingkungannya seperti itu. Ini saya coba presentasi beberapa karya yang mungkin relate dengan tema kita pada siang kali ini. Ini saya mulai dengan satu proyek di tahun 2016 ya. Ini bioindikator. Bioindikator ini adalah organisme, dia memprovide quantitative information on the quality of the environment around it. Jadi dia makhluk-makhluk yang memiliki kemampuan untuk menyimpan informasi terkait kualitas dari lingkungan sekitarnya seperti itu. Dan proyek ini di tahun 2016 itu saya mulai, ketika itu saya tertarik dengan satu organisme, dia adalah lichen ya. Lichen ini dia tidak tumbuh tidak lahir secara tradisional, tapi dia tumbuh secara gabungan dari beberapa makhluk hidup. Ada fungi, dia ada alga, dan terbaru dia ada yeast juga bergabung di sana. Dia proses pembentukan lichen ini menurut saya sangat menarik karena dia adalah proses dari bagaimana organisme, bagaimana makhluk hidup berusaha untuk bertahan hidup, survival. Jadi dia mengharapkan kelembaban air dari si jamur, kemudian dia mengharapkan juga fotosintesis dari si alga. Terciptalah si lichen ini. Tapi karena proses fusion ini, jadi ada satu karakter dari lichen itu, dia tidak memiliki kekuatan pelindung yang kuat. Karenanya ketika ada PM, ada partikel, ada apapun akan hadir di sekitarnya, itu akan mudah buat terserap oleh si lichen. Ini salah satu metode yang sangat lama ya, dari tahun 1800 nih. Si lichen ini dijadikan bioindikator karena dia berada di mana-mana dan dia sangat sensitif. Jadi dia dan murah juga. Pemilihan ini sebagai bioindikator sangat murah seperti itu. Kemudian dari sana saya mencoba buat berangkat dari kota tempat saya bekerja, tentunya di Bandung ya. Bandung tentunya seperti kita pahami semuanya dia adalah sebuah kota, dia adalah bagian dari Bandung Basin, cekungan besar di sekitar Bandung itu ya. Dan seperti kita lihat di sini dalam gambar yang kanan itu, Bandung itu dia berada di bagian bawah dari si basin tersebut, dari cekungan, dari si mangkok tersebut seperti itu. Dan karakter dari tipologi seperti ini akan membuat karakter sebuah kota yang dia fragile, dia rentan akan beberapa hal terkait lingkungan. Dia ada penurunan degradasi tanah, terus permasalahan dengan air. Dan dalam konteks dari karya bioindikator ini saya coba buat melihat bagaimana ketika si lichen ini kita coba ngambil metode beberapa sampel dari bawah cekungan dari kota Bandung ini. Saya mengambil beberapa sampel, kemudian saya juga ngambil sampel dari bagian tertinggi, dan hipotesanya berarti dia akan ada, kalau berbahasa secara estetika visual, dia akan ada perubahan warna dari si lichen tersebut. Dia akan berubah warna jadi lebih gelap, dia akan secara kuantitas populasinya dia akan berubah, terus dia secara bentuk dia juga akan berubah. Nah itu data itu kemudian saya coba buat tampilkan dalam proyeksi karya ini. Dari situ kemudian ada salah satu bagian menarik. Proyek ini di awal dengan berkeliling kota Bandung dari bagian selatan kemudian ke utara, dan kemudian pada di bagian utara itu di jalan Maribaya. Dia adalah guest house Balitsa. Dia adalah guest house milik dari Ministry Pertanian Indonesia. Nah di situ saya lihat ada beberapa fence pagar besi banyak. Ini jalan ini sekitar 200 meter jalannya. Kemudian yang saya lihat menarik itu ketika melihat sana adalah lichen yang tumbuh di dalam si batang tersebut, di permukaan si besi tersebut. Ini adalah salah satu penemuan saja ketika hunting lichen, yang salah satu yang sangat menurut saya menarik ya. Kemudian saya dari sini saya coba buat memindahkan pagar-pagar ini. Dia berjumlah sekitar 200 batang kalau tidak salah. Kemudian saya coba membawa ini ke sebuah tempat yang baru. Ya di sini mungkin terjadi juga bagaimana bernegosiasi ya, bagaimana kita tadi seperti Pak Tisna juga, bagaimana meyakinkan mereka bahwa saya ingin mencabut si fence ini untuk sebuah karya. Kemudian setelah beberapa negosiasi akhirnya bisa dibawa karya ini, dan kemudian saya bawa ke studio saya di Bandung atas. Kemudian saya sebar sebenarnya si beberapa batang-batang ini di beberapa titik di kota Bandung, di kota, terus di bawah di beberapa ini. Kemudian saya pamerkan di salah satu tempat ini, saya bawa ke Jakarta. Jadi dari sini mungkin saya ingin mengajak untuk audiens melihat sedikit kepekaan terhadap satu hal kecil yang berubah. Yang sebenarnya kalau kita lihat si lichen dan pagar-pagar ini kan dia sangat lumrah ya di sekitaran kita sendiri, tapi kemudian inilah menariknya membawa sebuah objek ketika dimasukkan dalam ruang seni, ruang sublim seperti kata Pak Tisna tadi. Dia kemudian mempertanyakan lagi nih, ini terkait si batang-batang ini, terkait si warna-warna si lichen, terkait perubahannya, terkait gimana ini seninya. Dan menurut saya itu adalah sebuah tantangan yang memang yang harus dihadapi oleh perkembangan dari kita tidak mau sebagai seniman kita pada saat ini. Bagaimana kita bisa berbicara atau kita bisa menceritakan tentang konsep dari kita kepada disiplin-disiplin dari ilmuwan yang lain. Kemudian setelah Liken, proses Liken itu ada beberapa gambar lagi, tapi mungkin saya akan tunjukkan nanti. Ini kemudian saya pergi juga ke bagian selatan di kota Bandung, bagian titik nol dari tingkat terendah dari kota Bandung, untuk melihat di sini ada satu hal yang langsung menarik perhatian saya dari visual adalah flood mark, garis banjir ya. Ini di daerah Bojong Soang. Di sini bisa kita lihat dengan jelas perbedaan warna antara bagian yang pernah terendam banjir dan bagian yang belum terendam banjir. Ini sangat tinggi ya, lumayan atas. Kita lihat ini sudah hampir di atas pintu. Kemudian dari sini saya coba membawa si flood marks ini untuk membuat sebuah karya. Ini adalah sebuah sketsa dari garis batas banjir ketika itu. Dan ini kemudian saya coba bagaimana mempresentasikan si garis batas banjir tersebut dalam satu bentuk baru dan mengajak audiens untuk mengalami. Karena saya pikir hal ini harus dialami ya, harus merasakan, harus ada yang dirasakan oleh audiens kalau kita bicara tentang hal seperti ini. Kemudian saya aplikasikan salah satunya itu di Yogyakarta. Waktu itu ada event art job dengan Pak Jenong waktu itu kuratornya. Saya coba mengaplikasikan, memindahkan dengan ini si garis banjir tersebut ke Yogyakarta. Di sini di balik dari karya ini saya membuat sistem sederhana sebenarnya sirkulasi air yang berjalan secara terus menerus untuk menunjukkan sebenarnya bagaimana secara sederhana sistem air secara alam itu berjalan dengan secara naluriah, dengan secara alaminya. Jadi dia mengalir kemudian ke bawah seperti itu. Dia ada penadanya bagian kanan bawah, mungkin dari sini tidak terlihat. Dia akan terus bersirkulasi seperti itu. Dan di objeknya sendiri pada dinding ini saya ambil dari properti dari Bandung, saya bawa langsung. Dia dari pagar-pagar juga dari fiber yang telah ditumbuhi oleh lumut, ditumbuhi oleh si Liken, jamur seperti itu. Kemudian saya bawa ke dalam galeri. Ini merupakan salah satu detail di kiri bagaimana airnya turun secara sederhana. Kemudian beberapa audiens mencoba untuk mengalami dari si karya ini. Dari sini kemudian ada beberapa mikroorganisme lain yang menarik. Saya banyak berangkat memang dari organisme yang dia mempunyai karakter selain sebagai bioindikator, dia juga sebagai decomposer, dia sebagai pengurai di dalam sebuah ekosistem seperti itu. Karena saya banyak berhubungan dengan jamur seperti itu. Dan kemudian salah satu yang proyeknya adalah Tubifex. Tubifex dia adalah cacing darah. Mungkin kalau yang kecilnya suka main cupang akan sangat dekat dengan si cacing ini. Dia adalah pakan dari cupang. Dan menariknya ini dari situ Tubifex dia juga sebagai indikator dari airnya seperti itu. Kemudian saya coba buat melihat ya dalam sudut pandang yang lebih mikroskopik ketika itu, dan untuk melihat proses pemompaan si darahnya ya. Dan sini ini oranye tapi sebenarnya dia lebih merah warnanya. Merah darah dia bisa disebut juga dengan cacing darah ya. Ini karena cahaya jadi lebih oranye. Jadi ada proses pemompaan di dalam tubuhnya itu seperti itu. Kemudian dari sana saya mencoba buat mengajak kolaborasi dengan salah satu musisi. Dia fokus terhadap musik healing ya. Dia membuat karya-karya musik yang digunakan untuk sebagai terapi seperti itu, sebagai proses healing. Dan saya pikir ini menarik buat dikolaborasikan bagaimana kita bisa relate dengan makhluk yang sangat kecil, makhluk yang mikroorganisme. Tahun 2017 ini si proyek ini berjalan, karena pada dasarnya kan kita sebagai makhluk dimensional karena kita susah buat menghargai dengan makhluk-makhluk yang jauh lebih kecil seperti itu. Mungkin sekarang jauh berbeda tentunya ketika kita mengalami pandemi ini. Jadi karena semua orang sudah lebih aware dengan makhluk-makhluk yang di dalam mikroorganisme, makhluk yang tidak terlihat seperti itu. Nah, dalam proyek ini saya mengamati dengan mikroskop. Kemudian di sini ini salah satu hasilnya itu membuat sebuah CD. Dia akhirnya memasarkannya itu bukan di toko musik, tapi dia memasarkannya di toko-toko obat karena dia fungsinya sebagai musik healing. Yang terasri dia Utrecht, kawan kita dari Bandung, sekarang mungkin di Jogja, judul Angel of Turu. Ini beberapa eksperimen yang kita coba. Nah, menariknya dari Utrecht ini juga kita coba merespon dari cahaya dari impact dari si mikroorganisme tersebut. Kemudian ini adalah salah satu presentasi akhirnya. Ini juga di Jogja ketika itu. Saya memvisualisasikan dengan 3 karya video dengan musik yang diharapkan ketika audiens bisa masuk ke sana dia dapat mengalami si interaksi yang lebih dekat antara proses pergerakan dari si darah yang di etching ini dengan kita sebagai manusia, seperti itu. Pada tahun-tahun ini banyak karya saya itu terkait dengan interaksi bagaimana manusia dan makhluk mikroorganisme itu berinteraksi. Salah satunya lagi ini mengarahkan pada karya berikutnya, itu adalah sebuah karya ini kerjasama waktu itu dengan ini sebuah proyek, dia acara dari Ruang Rupa di Jakarta 2018 ya. Ini adalah temanya adalah pangan, konsep tentang pangan. Nah, di proyek ini saya mengajukan sebuah kerjasama dengan Rumah Sakit Polri ya, dan bagian dari forensik medical installation ya. Dia kalau di Rumah Sakit Polri di Jakarta ini dia adalah bagian ketika proses otopsi dari kasus-kasus dari kepolisian yang dibawa ke sini. Biasanya banyak mereka menyebutnya ini CX. CX itu artinya orang-orang yang tidak mempunyai data ketika dia meninggal, kemudian dia dibawa di sini buat diotopsi ataupun ada kebutuhan untuk mengotopsi dari si ketika meninggal tersebut. Ini adalah sebuah proyek yang menurut saya intens ya. Ini hanya sebulan sebenarnya berjalannya, tapi kita sangat intens karena saya tidak ada background sama sekali di kedokteran, dan pengalaman saya bertemu dengan misalnya dengan korps, dengan mayat itu belum pernah saya lihat itu sebelumnya. Tapi itu adalah salah satu konsekuensi dari ketika kita mencoba bekerja berkolaborasi dengan disiplin lain, kita harus bisa mempelajari, mencoba memahami dari sudut pandang mereka gitu. Pada awalnya saya bilang ketika proyek ini saya seniman, saya akan bekerja hanya di laboratorium, saya memegang, karena tugas saya itu hanya di depan mikroskop, kemudian saya mengamati, bikin video, bikin sebuah timeline. Saya bilang ke mereka bahwa saya tidak akan turun ke proses otopsi karena saya tidak akan sanggup dalam proses itu. Saya hanya akan bekerja di laboratoriumnya saja gitu, mengamati pengamatan visual dari si larva yang tumbuh dari si mayat tersebut. Jadi kemudian semakin hari ketika kita makin rapat dan semakin dekat, kemudian salah satu dokter itu bilang kepada saya, kamu harus lihat prosesnya, kamu harus mencoba memahami bagaimana proses postmortem, bagaimana proses perubahan pada tubuh manusia ketika kita sudah mulai meninggalkan nyawanya, seperti itu. Karena pada saat itu saya pikir saya hanya mengambil sampel dan membawanya hanya kecil dalam mikroskop, tapi kemudian saya harus ikut juga dalam proses tersebut. Hasil dari proyek ini adalah sebuah video presentasi. Awalnya itu dia adalah sebuah live streaming, tapi ada beberapa hal terutama terkait etik, terkait ini yang salah satu itu bagaimana ya, lumayan kita harus cukup yakin dengan proyek dari seperti ini. Ini adalah presentasinya, jadinya presentasi tertutup di sana di Gunung Selatan. Jadi presentasinya tidak terbuka, dia hanya undangan dan hanya menyaksikan beberapa sebuah video yang hanya sebenarnya berdurasi dari 3 menit 22 detik video ini. Dari video pembesaran mikroskopik ini, di sini yang ingin diperlihatkan adalah sistem pencernaan dari si maggots tersebut. Tapi setidaknya saya tidak ingin menampilkan secara ini. Saya pilih beberapa visual yang mungkin tidak langsung membawa audiens untuk mengarahkan ke hal tersebut, tapi lebih kepada melihat bagaimana elemen lain dalam si visual tersebut. Jadi di sini ada video 3 menit ini dia berjalan. Di sini kita lihat struktur sederhana dari sistem pencernaannya, kemudian dia bergerak dan time lapse selama 1 minggu ketika itu. Ya, dari proyek ini adalah salah satu sebenarnya konsep sederhana bagaimana kita melihat life cycle, perputaran dalam kehidupan ya, perputaran ketika ada kematian, kemudian dia datanglah kehidupan yang baru, dan dalam konteks si pangan tersebut, dalam proses tersebut, kita sebagai manusia pun ketika kita meninggal, kita akan menjadi sebuah bagian dari ekosistem tersebut, dan bagian dari sebuah kosmos. Karenanya visualnya dia terlihat seperti outer space. Ini beberapa tanggapan dari audiens juga, mereka melihatnya ini seperti suatu outer space ya, dan ada seperti itu. Kemudian dari sana saya coba saya tampilkan dalam bentuk-bentuk yang lain tentunya. Masih berbicara dalam konteks dari komposer. Saya juga bekerja sebagai drawing, itu masih saya lakukan sampai sekarang, buat kerja-kerja dengan organisme adalah jamur, patung dengan gips, dan ditumbuhi oleh jamur itu sangat representatif untuk berbicara decomposer. Nah, dari pengalaman saya bekerja dengan beberapa kawan-kawan saintis, kawan-kawan seniman yang tertarik dengan kerja-kerja interdisiplin, maka pada tahun 2020 ini di tengah-tengah pandemi ini, kemudian saya membuat sebuah foundation, ya, sebuah yayasan. Adalah sebuah yayasan yang memang kita fokuskan untuk bekerja seni dan sains. Ini saya mengajak salah satu postdoc, dia sekarang postdoc di PPN ITB. Dia fokus bekerja di wilayah bioengineering. Dia ininya stem cell. Karenanya kita pada karya-karya awalnya itu banyak bekerja di wilayah sel, ya. Kita melihat bagaimana perilaku, mencoba melihat bagaimana perilaku manusia mungkin bisa dilihat dari tahapan sel, kemudian kaitannya dengan ketika dia menjadi sebuah sosial, berinteraksi dengan lingkungan seperti itu. Ada beberapa persamaan yang kita dari eksperimen-eksperimen yang kita lihat di lokus ini. Ya, ini adalah beberapa, mungkin saya next saja. Ya, ini lab yang sedang kita garap sekarang, lokus kita menyebutnya Science Studio. Ada Science Studio, satu lagi dia ada Art Laboratory. Kita mau balik dua itu. Untuk saat ini kita bekerja hanya banyak alat-alat yang DIY sebenarnya, tapi kita coba maksimalkan dengan peralatan yang ada, yang diharapkan mungkin dari kawan-kawan seniman atau kawan-kawan saintis bisa bekerja berinteraksi di lab lokus ini. Lokus ini dia kita mencoba sekarang ada sebuah residensi seniman dengan saintis, kita coba garap bersama. Kemudian beberapa proyek juga ini salah satu yang terakhir ini kita bikin ini dengan Pak Yuki juga nih dari desain interior, ya. Ini lokus, ya. Lokus ini awal-awal kekaryaannya kita banyak fokus kepada material, terutama material yang ramah lingkungan, ya, atau material yang kemudian dia dapat terdekomposisi baik dengan lingkungan. Ini jadi base, jadi kita anggap itu sebagai kuda-kuda dasar bagi si lokus. Bagaimana kita bermulai dari sebuah material, kita sangat mencoba buat sangat sensitif, sangat ini terhadap material, karena setelah itu kita akan bisa membicarakan hal yang banyak, dan material ini adalah salah satu yang sangat penting di lokus ini, dan terutama terkait dengan biodegradable. Jadi kita riset terkait salah satunya ini adalah, ini sebenarnya sudah banyak diteliti, dan juga salah satu bagian dari tesis saya terkait menggunakan mikrokomposit. Dia bagaimana proses si jamur dia membuat bagaimana dia merekatkan elemen-elemen yang ada, kemudian bisa berubah karakteristiknya. Ini adalah salah satu proses yang kita garap seperti itu. Kemudian ada salah satu proyek yang kita garap ini adalah preputim perspektif. Ini bagaimana kita mencoba melihat memanfaatkan luka di sini dalam artian adalah proses circumstance, proses sunat. Sebenarnya itu adalah sebuah source yang besar, terutama bagi kita di Indonesia dengan negara muslim dengan banyak wajib untuk sunat, dan itu bisa menjadi sebuah source buat membuat sebuah skin seed. Jadi bentuk dari kulit menjadi bahan dasar untuk membuat kulit baru. Ini proyek ini sedang kita garap saat ini, dan ini ada proses kiri dat. Di sebelah kiri ini ada proses bagaimana sel-sel kulit kemudian dilukai. Ini adalah pengamatan melalui mikroskopiknya. Ini kemudian the future plan-nya ini yang akan kita garap itu adalah membuat sebuah multi-layer skin seed, dan bisa kemudian membuat sebuah skin patch dari sana. Ya, seperti ini bukan dari yang riset kita, tapi ini akan ke arah sini. Kita baru sampai di tahapan seperti ini. Mungkin sekian dari saya. Terima kasih semua.
Terima kasih Mas Tepu. So that's from Syaiful Garibaldi. I will try to resume a little bit about what Pak Tisna have done. Actually, what the matters for Pak Tisna is the word body is a machine. So our body is the machine itself. It came from his art practice in printmaking. He developed imah budaya or cultural house. It's it called ibu, mother, in a place where before the place was a paddy field, and then now became a dump field. It's like he built some barn, yeah, before in that place Cigondewa, the place name. There's much paddy barn, and then now there's plastic barn. Also Pak Tisna involved in mega project in Indonesia called Citarum Harum. So Citarum is one of big rivers that cross in West Java region throughout to also Jakarta and around. So this mega project was executed by the president himself. I think after there's a viral video of river full of trash. So Paktisna involved in there as well, and also the latest he involved in Jatiwangi, a place that produce terracotta, and yeah, Paktisna mostly use any materials in creating his art. So actually he made a sublimation between personal expression, political will, and tradition, also public art and social art in such one of the cultural event, which is also a collective movement. So this Jatiwangi and also the football, Doa Untuk Tanah or Pray for the Land, will be exhibited in Documenta. And also Paktisna revived some old movie theaters in Bandung City to be a cultural place, and moved to Syaiful Garibaldi, or well known as Tepu. He works with microorganisms like fungus and stuff. We can underline his word that in this pandemic, human as a complex organism put regards in the existence of microorganism. And also he recently developed with his friend the Locus Foundation, which many people join there to create something new, like interiorist science person and stuff. So because there's no question yet, I will move the Q&A to the end of the session. So Mak Ari, are you ready to take my place to moderate Ibu Arika and Pak Rodrick?
Of course.
Thank
Hi
you,
again.
Mak Ari. I will join you again in QA, yeah?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Pak Willy. And that were obviously very interesting presentations from Tisna and Syaiful. I hope also for those who listen in English, they get a clear sort of explanations of my interpretation. Since I'm not a professional interpreter, so I was a bit worried. Hopefully it was okay. All right. So
I think it's
I
okay,
think we
Mak Ari.
can move on.
Yes.
I think we can move on to Dr. Erika Seccombe and also Rodrick Bamford. Our speakers are artists from Australian side. So let me introduce them to you. So first of all, Dr. Erika Seccombe is a visual artist based in the Canberra region, living in semi-rural New South Wales area. She's currently a senior lecturer at the ANU School of Art and Design, and her interdisciplinary arts practice spans from traditional land-based imaging, print media, and drawing to experimental digital platforms using frontier scientific visualization software. Promoting interdisciplinary practice, art, science, and technology, Erika is a member of the ANAT Board of Directors. ANAT is a global leader in brokering opportunities for artists to work with science and technology partners. Using understanding collaboration, research, and experimentation are the bedrock of innovation. So, hello, I'm gonna greet Erika. Hi, Erika.
All right. And thank you so much for a lovely introduction, but also thank you, Paktisna and Syaiful. That was a really amazing talks, like really lovely to be introduced to your work, and I feel very privileged to be following on after you. So thank you very much. I hope you like my work.
So I'm gonna give you the screen,
I'm going to
Erika?
share. Yeah, I'll share the screen. Today, I'm going to talk about my interdisciplinary art practice, but also talk about some of the key ideas about what makes a practice interdisciplinary. So I'm going to just show you an excerpt from a video I made. So to give you an understanding, I hope you like. I think this will, Tisna, will be really like something that you really like. I really think about how we see through things, or how technology sees. Interested in how computation extends human vision. So this is actually from a fly being x-rayed in 3D and it's x-rayed in various data sets. So it's not mesh framed, it's actually virtual data, and it's used, I use micro CTs or a 3D micro X-ray tomography instrument. And I have learned how to visualize the data that comes from that that information. And I'll let you know a little bit about how and why I've come to making work like this, where you get to see the maggot turning into a fly. And as you can see here, the maggot is starting to transform. We're starting to realize that it's got a head and eyes. You can see that it's beginning to grow. Forensic scientists in 2015. And it took me a while to put this together. And it's not something that a scientist would do, because it's not about a factual kind of evidence finding for the fly. But what I was interested in was the metamorphosis, that moment, that mystery that we don't, we don't have explanations for, which is why and how does the maggot suddenly become a fly? In the same way that we don't really know why or how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. So, there are theories put forward like that perhaps they are two different animals, or that there's something in it that transforms the DNA in the uterus to an adult, to our older selves, until we become elderly, and then we pass away. This metamorphosis of becoming one form and then into another, as we move from one material form of being to another material form of being. So I will just stop this here, but you can see the full video on my website. So one of the things that I teach at university is art in the digital age. And these are the kinds of questions that I get my students to consider about why an artist might be interdisciplinary. So how do artists develop their interdisciplinary questions? That's a lot of questions. That's what I'm often asked. So an interdisciplinary question can be born out of personal curiosity. It often begins by following a hunch. So you have an idea that something might be there, but you're not quite sure. And an artist's own curiosity about something can lead them to frame specific questions and search for multiple perspectives. It's to investigate other disciplines that can inform them with new knowledge and research about a subject, or leads them to investigate new technologies. So artists begin by experimenting with different materials and technologies, in order to formulate specific questions that they want to investigate further. It may lead artists to work with others who are already working in the field of inquiry, but are not artists, such as scientists, mathematicians, or engineers. As a result, the work becomes interdisciplinary, because without the other disciplines, it wouldn't have existed. And I could say it couldn't exist if it wasn't for the support of the scientists at the ANU physics and engineering, because of all of the work that they do. But there is also a perception that artists cannot contribute new knowledge to STEM disciplines. And we call STEM disciplines science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But this has proven to be untrue. Artists can contribute new knowledge to these fields. And that's what I'm really interested in, is that nexus about how we as artists actually have very valid things to say. So I work for ANAT, for art and technology. So I first got one of these grants in 2011. I've been working with ANAT ever since to develop and promote interdisciplinary practice in Australia and more broadly overseas. And what we're committed to nurturing, supporting and championing the best artists working in interdisciplinary practices today. So ANAT's program includes residencies, symposia, workshops, exhibitions, artist commissions, fellowships and networking events. So what ANAT asks, and this is what I'm interested in, is how art, science and technology can be transformative, how it can create new forms of engagement, a new space for creative expression, like your science lab, which is so amazing. I really love that. Collaborate to create new meanings. And how can art influence science and technology? And how can art contribute new knowledge to STEM disciplines? So some of the key debates and issues of the body in the age of the post-human, what I've become interested in is through traditional photographic and printmaking and drawing, it's through those processes of interacting with process and technology that I've really started to think about frontier scientific visualization. And it's through my practice, I explore the use of scientific technology, such as microscopes and X-rays. And this is where I began to think about investigating our perceptions of the limits of nature, to explore questions about ourselves and our experiences of the world. So by addressing issues around art and nature and scientific imaging and knowledge, I'm interested in individual and collective experiences of connecting with nature, real or artificial, particularly in an era facing environmental crisis and uncertainty. So what I've been really interested in is the way that histories have created. So one of the things that I've been really interested in is looking at the history of modelling and how modelling through the turn of the 20th century has really changed the way that we see and understand scientific visualization. So looking very much at the Western aesthetic of visualizing different sorts of scientific ideas and expressions of what we understand to be a visual model of science or a scientific discovery, and very interested in the way that modernism and modernists at the turn of the 20th century also were very influenced by new scientific discoveries, that modernism was started to really change the way they thought because of non-Euclidean geometry, X-ray, microscopy, astronomy, and also starting to think about DNA and an atomic energy as well. So what's really important is that we often, when we think about artists working in this field, we think of, say, the artist working in isolation, that they're working toward their own ideal or their own aesthetic. And when you start to collaborate with scientists and technologists, you really start to realize there's a different kind of aesthetic that happens, particularly when it's collaborative. So one of the principal ideas that we have with ANAT is the idea that when you apply to this residency, you already have built up a relationship with your collaborative partner, your scientist, and they can also see the benefit of the artists working with the science or technology in that field. So it's not just about art, it's actually about what does it mean for the scientist as well. And because we've been supporting these residencies where there is this nexus of collaboration, that we really think about how these ideas are supported through the program and what kinds of ideas come about, we realize that there's a lot of risk taking. So there's quite often, you're not quite sure what the outcome is going to be, that quite often the outcome can be transdisciplinary in that it's neither art nor science, because it sits in the juncture where both of them meet, and perhaps it creates a new kind of thinking or a new kind of aesthetic that can't quite be defined by either discipline. So you can see here on this website, there's lots of examples of all the different sorts of relationships that have been built up over time through our programs. And we very much want to continue these sorts of collaborations and programs across not only Australia, but start to connect them with different people internationally as well. So what Anna is doing is actually at the forefront of that sort of, Dr. Anna Ropak is at the forefront of that interdisciplinary thinking, and that she's building relationships across different universities with different kinds of researchers. And she's really considering how her practice relates to other people's research, not just in the field of art, but also in the field of art, science and technology. The kind of relationship that she's building with IBET is exactly the sorts of relationships that you can see are really successful, because there's already a dialogue here, because as you can see with the seminar, it brings people together to talk about where their differences are and also where their similarities lie. So this website is a fantastic resource, and I hope you get to look at it and work through it. But because my slideshow is not working, I should probably let Rod now start his talk, because he's got a really exciting talk about his collaboration in Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Ibu Erika. I mean, like, these things happen also with technology, and looking at the website that you've shown us, it clearly shows and clearly was able to kind of like continue the discussion from what Syaiful has initiated here, which is the locus of art and science. So growing from the individual, the artist individual, trying to network with everyone else, and then, trying to kind of like create a collective, and then here a network, and not only like a collective, but network of collectives and individuals is very inspiring. So thank you very much for the presentation. So
no worries. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. And we are going to go over to our last speaker. And after this, we're going to have our discussion for this afternoon/evening session. So let me introduce Rod Bamford to you. Rodrick Bamford is a senior lecturer at the Australian National University, a practitioner and a researcher working at the intersections of art, craft, and design. His work draws on specialist experience in ceramics, digital media, and fabrication to explore emerging technologies, hybrid digital or analog aesthetics, and ecologies of production. Taking the form of tangible speculative experiments, his research establishes scenarios through which digitally mediated relationships between people and artifacts can be examined, aiming to better understand how we experience and assimilate new visualization and production methods and their impact on human perception, psychosocial, and environmental engagement. Hello, Rod. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks for the lovely introduction, Ardhana. And also to everybody, thank you for the invitation. ITB, it's sort of seen a couple of colleagues I haven't seen for a long time in the audience, which has been great. As Erica mentioned, I'll touch on a previous project that I worked on with ITB Department of Industrial Design a little later to finish off my talk. Thank you also, Syaiful and Tisna, for a really interesting couple of presentations. I really loved looking at the variety of work and how the range of issues that you approached in your work, even though I can't understand Indonesian very well at all, it was still evident to me. So thank you for that. And Erica, God, what a shame about the internet in rural Australia, huh? But hey, I think I think the aspects of interdisciplinary studies and particularly the frameworks for those connections really came across clearly. So that was, I think I'm going to be talking to you about ANAT. So I might, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. So I've called this talk Speculative Making, and it emerges from the way I undertake research, which is really strongly connected to my art training and background. My main speciality is in ceramics. So that's from a craft perspective, which is one that I think needs reconsideration at this time because it has a very particular, so working in that field brings a very particular perspective that is quite connecting and holistic. And if I just do a slight introduction to that while we have a look at this next slide. This is Charles Jenks' installation in the Scottish Worthies in Northern England, obviously. And this contrasts the symbols of transportation, a railway bridge from the Industrial Revolution with a footpath, a walking footpath. So it introduces a perspective that is very much has driven our perhaps romantic view of craft in the 20th century through figures such as Ruskin and Morris, at least the Western perspective. I know the Eastern perspective is very different. And one of the interesting things about studying this field in Australia was that we had a great mix of visitors as lecturers and artists from Japan in particular, as well as North Europe and North America and the UK. Those were the days when travel was much freer than it is now. But one of the interesting alignments that I make between working in a material practice is the way of, it's about thinking from the detail and the physical, intimate engagement with materials outwards, rather than the big picture looking in, which is often a perspective that it happens through the observation via instruments, particularly scientific instruments. Craft is, and early, I suppose, let's say, early technological interactions with materials provide a connected, intimate experience with materials. And this is becoming of interest to recent philosophers and environmentalists. So there's an author by the name of Jane Bennett who wrote a book called Vibrant Matter. She's an American, as I say, environmental and political philosopher. She talks about craft and compares craft and science in this way. She says the desire of the craft person to see what a metal can do, rather than the desire of the scientist to know what a metal is, has enabled the former to discern a life in metal and thus eventually to collaborate more productively with it. So this is a fairly provocative post-humanist philosophical perspective, I think, but for me it reinforces this interconnectedness with material, but more broadly with these questions of the cosmos that have been coming up throughout the early, the first session of today's really interesting set of seminars, set of presentations. So I'm just going to now move on to perhaps try and share with you how some of those ideas have evolved through my work, and we'll move this quite quickly, and then I'll look at the digital bamboo project that I worked on a few years ago with Tita. And so this is a very an early work of mine, but it represents this my interest in how science interprets history and how humans rewrite history through particular contexts and visions. So the imagery on this is actually of Charles Darwin, who was related to Josiah Wedgwood, one of the founding industrialists of the Industrial Revolution, and a potter in the UK. The Wedgwood brand is very well known. But what I find interesting is that Darwin's theory of evolution is largely built on this concept of accident. Accidents resulting in selection, which results in this, the transformation of species over long periods of time. But the accident is also one of these tragedies that happens when you work in ceramics. Materials break very easily. So the fragment became this interesting symbol for me of both how it's almost like a gem, something that is found by archaeologists to document history. At the same time, it's also part of a tragic event. So it marks something which is broken in time. It's also, it became for me a really interesting vehicle through which to create fake news, I suppose, to create these artificial shards which could retell stories about history in different ways, with a level of authenticity of the material object that's very recognizable to people. So these were all probably enlarged about 50 times the original size of the shard. They were worked off real life examples. Part of this interest in working from the inside out and being involved with technologies has led me on a journey where I've worked across a number of different industrial processes. So a lot of my collaboration has been with industry as opposed to with other artists, I suppose, or scientists. But nevertheless, the investigations that I've undertaken have probably been driven by similar curiosities. So this is a large work that's about over 2 meters high. And to create it, I needed to draw on industrial techniques of brick making, rebuild the tool, and so I could work in the studio. And once again, I was using the symbolism of visualization depictions of history, referring to architectural forms, and sort of comparing those with industrial tools, in this case, the screw. As I mentioned, I was working with industry. I also worked as artist in residency in a number of factories. These were all ceramic factories at the time. And this is the Kohler work I created in the Kohler company in North America. And this was a work that particularly focused on the relationship between science, technology, and play, and some of the similarities that occurred between the different perspectives of those fields of occupation. So these were all stacked individual objects that made use of the mass production process to create a series of installations of different forms. And they did not deny the manufacturing artifacts, if you like, and you can see the lines, the seams running perhaps diagonally against the stepped top forms that are left untreated to refer back to the aesthetics of that production process rather than clean them up, which is a standard industrial process. There are some shots of inside the factory with a couple of other works that I was making around on that theme. And you can see from the image on the left that the aesthetics and the visual sort of qualities of early manufacturing processes in the creation of enameled cast iron bathtubs. These environments are really quite brutal for humans to work in. They're very unhealthy, and they're also very environmentally destructive. And that was what those experiences have not left me since, although the memories of those experiences have not left me since that time, which was the late 80s. I interestingly through that process, became interested in what factories do. So, and I became involved in a number of design projects, designing ceramic tableware for manufacturers. And I was inspired to try and do something about eliminating the amounts of waste that I experienced when I was working there as an artist in residence. So this particular work was driven by a life cycle analysis process, which wasn't particularly scientific in its application. It was limited to what knowledge was available at the time. But essentially the concept here was to reduce the standard cafe orthodoxy or standard of having one saucer for every different sized cup and reduce that down to a single universal saucer that could support a number of different shaped items, cups and bowls. And with that became, I suppose, achieved some savings in terms of the low hanging fruit regarding costings, but also the impact of all of the manufacturing process with making the additional sauces. So this experience led me, as I mentioned, having a real interest in industrial technologies and the emerging technologies that were being used in those factories. And as I explored those further, I became very interested in the new digital fabrication movement that was occurring and the establishment of maker spaces, which had brought a new perspective to the way I approached work, because it was a much more broadly collaborative movement, really. I mean, the whole open source technology development movement happened much more quickly because people shared material and ideas on the internet through chat rooms and various websites, and that happened outside the world of closed commercial interests. And in fact, many of the inventions around 3D printing were actually, dare I say, stolen or at least bought out by big companies such as 3D Systems from small experimental startups such as the BFB 3D printing firm in the UK. And this image shows that particular machine being used to 3D print ceramics. And when I was working on this, trying to actually take a 3D printer that was designed to print plastic and convert it to printing clay was the challenge, the obsession that I'd had for a while. And so one of the interests was being able to join a community that was involved in developing these ideas and share them and make progress together. Even though I couldn't physically be with those people, I could share information across the internet. The other really interesting aspect of this was the idea that the model of industrialization was in a sense being subverted through the emergence of the new maker movement, and subverted both in terms of the commercial model that I just described, but also subverted in terms of this idea of what a machine could create aesthetically. So usually the mass-produced machine technology-driven model of making is one that does rub out all of those seams that I was talking about before. It does remove all of those imperfections. But when you work with digital fabrication equipment, there are so many nuances that you can create instantaneously. The tooling times are disappear almost instantly. So you can iterate and you can change ideas extremely quickly. And you can also work with accidents because of that level of speed, because the cost involved is very low. You can afford to experiment. You can afford to really push the boundaries. And so that led to, this is an example of what can happen in that area. So this was a head actually as of my son, and it was inspired in one sense by the way mud wasps that we have in Australia build their nests, by essentially being organic 3D printers. But I was also interested in trying to reorientate the direction of the printing to actually form a topology that really mapped the three-dimensional form of the head, which, if you're familiar at all with most 3D printed formats, they're actually horizontal, and they have quite a particular visual aesthetic or visual logic to them. So this particular work was an example of experimenting, interfering with the standard process that the machine was designed for to try and develop a new aesthetic language around it. And I think that has become a strong interest of mine in working with these technologies. Interestingly, that work with 3D printing led to, it was driven by meeting some researchers in the Gifu in Japan, at the Gifu International Ceramic Research Center, who had developed a recycling process by crushing up old tableware, often that they would retrieve from high schools, crushing it up and then remaking clay objects from that recycled material. They were so effective, the amount of recycled material they could incorporate into the new clay bodies, that they were actually running out of material, and it was quite an ethical dilemma whether they should import new clay or whether they could recycle more of the existing ceramics in the area around Tajimi, where this was being developed. And so one of the ideas was, if they did that, they had to change the total manufacturing process for the production. And so I worked with a researcher named Yoshikazu Hasegawa, and on the idea that if this material could be 3D printed, then that would be a model that could have a future. So I was driven by the idea of at least proving the concept. Unfortunately, the movement of 3D printing to a mass manufacturing situation such as this has not yet happened, but it was a really interesting project to work on. Other spin-offs of that type of research include this idea of the digital workspace being a place where lots of different data of different forms can be combined together. So data from different sources can be visualized in different ways, can be manipulated, mutated, and transformed. And this work, which is titled Sonic Loop, drew on some of the early inspiration of the sound researcher Ernst Chladni, and his drawings are in the right-hand side. You might be familiar with Chladni drawings, which were created by spreading sand onto a vibrating plate, and the various frequency oscillations of the plate produce different patterns. And the research from there has informed the shaping of guitar bodies and similar types of instruments. So this was an idea that drove a question for me: could we use a sound to actually generate a form in 3 dimensions? And so I explored using oscilloscopes to produce various shapes, which I then translated and adapted into models which were assembled to create a form, which is the basket on the left. And it had so there was that angle to try and create what this piece was called Sonic Loop, to try and create a form from a sound wave, from a transmaterial type of object. It was also designed to hold anything from the size of an egg to the size of a coconut, as you can see here. So the dimensions in between each of those extruded sections, or the cut that's actually a cast form, were created with that transition in mind. And so from this journey into essentially digital forms of printing, I've also become interested and involved in digital printing, which is not new. I mean, the digital revolution in desktop printing started in the 1980s, but it's now that the applications are now spreading out across a range of different materials and into the world of ceramics. And this is one image of a series of, I suppose, renditions of a painted vase by the Australian artist Norman Lindsay back in the 1950s. And the image on the left shows the analysis done through 3D scanning using digital visualization and 3D modeling software to reproduce this vase that Norman Lindsay painted, which was deteriorating so badly it couldn't be touched, hence the need to try and recreate it, or at least conserve a variation of the form. And that was in collaboration with the National Trust of Australia. And so using a photogrammetry process, the original vase was photographed without the need of touching it. The digital tools were then used to reassemble it and create a pattern which reproduced the vase that you can see on the right-hand side. And what was interesting about the application of the technology here was not only the way it changed the visualization of the original textured painting, but also how it started to reveal very particular qualities visually that weren't available in any previous printing processes for ceramics. And that led me to a collaboration with the Royal College of Art. And I spent a year there in 2017 working on improving this laser printed digital printing for ceramics, which resulted in a collaboration with some industries such as Royal Crown Derby and Centaurus in the UK. So that's, I think, summarizes my background from the inside out. But now I'd like to finish with a brief discussion, as I mentioned, about the Digital Bamboo project, which is quite a different project, but perhaps more aptly represents the recent work I've been doing at university, working with the idea of these speculative research projects, engaging students and faculty in university collaborations. And I've done a few of these now, but the Digital Bamboo project with ITB, I think, is probably the most interesting one that I've experienced. So the image that you can see here is a combination of 3D printed plastic and traditional woven bamboo patterns from the area southwest of I think it's southwest of Bandung, Tarasak. Someone can please correct me on my pronunciation. I'm very sorry. Tasik Malaya, I think. It's the area where they make a number of a range of bamboo bird cages. So this project arose in 2013 with this idea of, could we connect in some ways traditional handcrafted processes and also work practices, traditions, with new emerging technologies. And Bandung had just started, one of the fab labs had just started to emerge there. And I had been talking with a colleague who worked at UNSW, where I was teaching at the time, working as an academic at the time. And I met with Dr. Tita Larazati and Dr. Adi Nugraha, and we, over a couple of years, explored this idea, which wasn't clear at all to begin with. But I just wanted to, so that's an image of one of the works in the exhibition. And these are a couple of the outcomes. So over a period of 3 years, we worked with some exchange between, so Tita and one of her students came to UNSW, and myself and one of my colleagues went to ITB. And we also spent some time looking around at potential projects and partners where this general concept might be realized. And to my surprise, there was a lot of excitement. I was particularly excited. Both Dr. Tita and Dr. Adi had already been doing this amazing research on bamboo product classifications, and particularly introducing design principles into the traditional manufacturing or the traditional craft process of producing bird cages. And what was fascinating was that behind the scenes, the bamboo makers were actually already experimenting with power tools and different ways of augmenting their traditional handmade processes, very handmade. Some of them, I remember seeing one method of drawing a bamboo cane was to actually have a piece of tin nailed onto the fork of a tree with a hole punched in it, and the bamboo was drawn through that to actually create the correct dimension. So there were these very traditional but very adaptive ways of working with the material that, as I said, extended to the use of power tools. The other thing that I was absolutely fascinated by was how I love the way that Wi-Fi in Bandung when I was there was, cafes in Bandung when I was there were classified by how good their Wi-Fi was, not their coffee so much, which I thought was pretty amazing. And I was also really taken by how innovative and adaptive Indonesian people were generally to taking up and hacking technology, which is something I didn't expect. And so that really excited me because it was all of a sudden the group of us thought, well, we can probably speculate on such a project. So this slide shows some of the results of the early experiments in how to join bamboo that we undertook at UNSW, just to give you an idea of the way we approached things from the inside out. And this is just an example of some of that amazing use of Twitter. So I remember being with Tita one day and she was telling me how essentially people do business via Twitter, get quotes to repair their cars and other things like that in Bandung. And so this really fluid way of not using technology for what it was designed to be used for was pretty exciting. And it sort of started to form the ideas behind what this project could become, which was essentially to set a loose thematic framework around a concept. And the one we ended up choosing was on the basis of security, which had resonance at the time. And we set up a program which was conducted at ITB, where a mixture of university students from ITB and from UNSW met with faculty from both institutions to work at ITB. And the bamboo experts from Tasikmalaya came to ITB to work with us. And after a period of developing concepts, the fabrication of the works took place in the ITB workshops. And you can see some of the discussions going on there. It was a really vibrant time. We had visits to the bamboo makers. There's that example of drawing the bamboo cane through the wire I was talking about. And we held an exhibition at ITB, and we also then managed to get funding to take that same exhibition and we had some funds to develop some of the outcomes a little further. And we took that to UNSW and held an exhibition there. And I've just got a few images of the works themselves. So they were very, very open and inventive, often interactive outcomes. So this sort of octopus-looking light was a beautifully poetic piece. So each of those tentacles was attached by a magnet to the main body, and they could be detached and taken with them. The person who detached them could take them with them as a torch or as a light at night to see where they were going. But it also functioned socially in a really interesting way. That ball became a charging station. So when the tentacle was attached back on the form, it would charge up. But when it was removed, it would always also indicate to a family member that someone was, a person had left the household. So it had this really beautiful sort of connecting poetic element to it. The image that you can see with the screen on the wall, that's an iPad, I think. And then below it's a mobile phone. And this is a bamboo spherical stool. When you sat on that, you triggered a device, took a photograph of you and uploaded it to Facebook, I think it was, which was quite a playful and surprising interaction. We worked with programmers to realize a lot of these ideas, which were sort of required inventing using Arduino and Raspberry Pi miniature computer systems and developing software solutions to try and make the interactivity work. This vertical lamp, I might have a better image of that. Yeah, this was a really beautiful work that influenced or inspired by traditional Indonesian batik, I think originally. And this was actually a programmable light that you could tweet to change colors. This was another interesting project. This was the concept was an emergency lamp that could be used to as a public signal for some sort of warning. And so this would operate by being able to tweet a hashtag to the device, and the more hashtags it accumulated, the brighter it would shine. And this work here was very much an analog work, even though it was created by laser cutting, but it was a storytelling lamp. So the idea was that the black cutouts based on the puppetry projections was rotated to allow someone to tell a story to a child. And so there were a range of really lovely outcomes from this project that I think highlighted for me how the imaginary creative process that takes place across art and design in its speculative form, not actually trying to solve a problem, but trying to actually suggest and develop connections between people and create conversations, dialogues, which has been one of the, this opening up of dialogue has been one of the, I think, themes of today's talk that's really caught my attention. These sort of unusual outcomes really did sponsor those types of conversations around the works, but also around the way we work. It was fascinating to see the way that the bamboo craftspeople were really not at all afraid of the newer technologies and could see how that potential could be integrated into their own practices. And I remember some of the conversations which were unexpected were that this might actually help keep people employed. It might help improve viability in our local area rather than losing some of the younger people to urban centres. So there were some really interesting conversations that arose from that. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And I'll hand back.
Thank you very much.
Ardhana.
Yes, thank you very much, Rodrick, for that very interesting presentations where we get to see and guided to kind of like walk through your art projects and in works in multidisciplinary and also speculative sort of like method. It's also one of the methods that I think is rarely touched, just because it tends to sort of like, is it a real method or not? It has that sort of nuance in the method itself. But in arts, I think it is in arts and design, it is a very important one that we have, and we continue to kind of like have this speculative sort of inquiry and curiosity. Okay, so I'm gonna invite Pak Willy and also all the other speakers to the screen.
Yes, we start the Q&A, yeah?
Yes.
There's a lot of questions already.
There's one question. I think all the speakers from Agung Hujat Nika, again, are one of our faculty members. He said, hi, I have a question addressed to anyone in the panel, and perhaps I'm just gonna give it to everyone in the panel. I'm wondering how the concept of interdisciplinary can bridge the gap between different kind of knowledge systems in the societies. I think we have touched a little bit this morning. I have an impression that the interdiscipline is still bounded by the modern definitions and categories of modern art, science, and technology, which are often over-institutionalized so as to marginalize traditional or non-Western system of knowledge, which is often considered non-art, non-modern, and non-scientific. Okay, if we can have
Probably,
also Pak Tisna and
Mbak Ari, I would like to ask Pak Agung, to elaborate probably the question. Pak Agung, are you there, Pak Agung?
Hello, hi. I think my question is clear already.
Yeah.
What I mean by maybe local system of knowledge, such as, maybe, the Primbon, this is like a local astrology, for instance. Astronomy. Yes. And then local knowledge about, like fetish, for instance, which is considered often has a sort of energy, whether it's also included in the, the concept of the interdiscipline.
I can answer that. Well, I suppose where we're looking at those kind of intersections, you wouldn't call spirituality a discipline in the way that we're thinking for the purpose of this talk today, which is art, science and technology and thinking about how those disciplines interact. But we all have our belief systems, and I think that does influence the way that we approach. And as I said in my talk, we get hunches. We know that there's something that drives us and drives our curiosity, and how do we want to express it? So a lot of artists today, particularly non-Western artists, very strong field, and are really thinking about how to bring in new technologies such as VR and augmented reality to put across non-Western perspectives, and also consider ideas about the soul or religion, and those kinds of technological abilities, because a lot of technology in science is about privilege. But because technology is becoming ubiquitous, there is a really amazing push with artists from lots of different countries really thinking about how to put across their cultural identity through technology, and how that actually connects globally and can be experienced globally as well. And when you posted that question, I was thinking perhaps what you could be really interested in is looking up the idea of new materialism, which takes away this idea of the anthropocentric view of the world, that it's not just from the point of view of the human, but we could actually think about ourselves, as Peter Swanton does as an Indigenous man from Australia, think more along the lines of who are we as part of the world, not just as a human, but thinking about all the other components in the world that connect to us as well. So new materialism might be something that you're thinking along the lines of.
Probably I want to pass it to Pak Tisna. Pak Tisna, menurut Bapak bagaimana Pak dalam praktek gitu ya, in the practice of multidisciplinary, bagaimana pengalaman Bapak beraktivitas bersama misalkan Pak Wenten ataupun siapapun yang lain gitu Pak?
Terima kasih Pak Willy. Saya kira ini menarik ya apa yang disampaikan oleh Ibu Erika dan dipicu oleh kegelisahan Pak Agung ya tentang masalah hubungan manusia yang di institusi itu jadi interdisiplin. Kalau saya sih memang di rumah ya, dalam kehidupan tradisi sehari-hari antara ilmu dan kehidupan itu tidak terpisah. Jadi biasa saja ketika saya masuk institusi di ITB maupun di mana gitu, hubungan dengan Pak Wenten, misalnya dengan Pak Jaim dan yang lain-lain ya tidak menjadi gap, karena energi yang saya sampaikan juga teman-teman itu mengalir saja begitu. Kita memang sudah terperosok ya pada disiplin yang terkotak-kotak juga dalam seni, termasuk ilmu pengetahuan. Jadi itu sudah terpetak-petak. Ini terjadi terutama di sekolah, juga perguruan tinggi. Sehingga bidang keilmuan kita tuh jadi tersegmentasi dan terpisah-pisah dengan ilmu lain, bahkan terpisah dengan kehidupan sehari-hari. Nah ini sebetulnya sudah diingatkan oleh sajak ya. Ada puisi Rendra. Rendra mengatakan dalam sajak seogok jagung ya. Dalam sajak seogok jagung itu bagaimana anak sekolah itu dihadapkan pada jagung di kamarnya, itu tidak bisa apa-apa gitu tuh, tidak bisa apa-apa karena melihat jagung ada gap, ini apa teorinya, ilmunya dan sebagainya harus dibagaimanakan gitu. Tapi kalau yang bukan sekolahan, yang lebur dengan jagung, dengan petani, dengan kehidupan sehari-hari, itu bisa jadi M.Sn, bisa jadi makanan, bisa jadi berbagai hal diolah gitu ya, diolah. Jadi sebetulnya ini memang harus kita merenung ya dari situasi ini. Jadi misalkan di bidang kita seni itu jadi studio lukis, studio grafis, studio keramik, patung, oleh sistem modern dikotak-kotakan. Padahal dalam kehidupan sehari-hari itu lebur saja satu dengan yang lain itu, apalagi kalau lihat alam ya dan kehidupan sehari-hari antara sungai, air mengalir, udara, pohon, ekosistem antara flora dan fauna dan sebagainya itu mengalir. Cuman kita selalu itu tidak ilmiah, yaitu kehidupan sehari-hari itu tidak tidak menjadi panutan, acuan ya. Sehingga kita berusaha membuat sesuatu lagi yang terkotak. Karena tidak bisa masuk studio grafis, lukis, patung, keramik, maka dibuat kotak lagi intermedia gitu ya. Terus di kotak-kotak dan juga diupayakan untuk interdisiplin ya dengan bidang lain. Padahal kalau kehidupan itu mengalir ya biasa, Dan itu ya sudah dibuktikan dalam seni-seni tradisi yang menyangga budaya kita, lebur antara misalkan antara wayang, dalang dengan nayaganya, dengan sindennya, dengan para penontonnya, dengan berbagai bidang. Nah ini memang harus ada perubahan di sekolah, di kampus-kampus, terutama di ITB harus dirubah sistem ini, ya dirubah menjadi kehidupan sehari-hari. Jadi tidak tidak menjadi jarak, ada jarak. Coba perhatikan Sungai Cikapundung ya, yang mengalir hanya 1 jengkal dari ITB, itu tuh padahal di ITB itu ada bidang-bidang keilmuan yang ada berbagai macam bidang keilmuan yang hubungannya dengan sungai itu. Tapi karena kita terkotak gitu ya, sudah bukan bidang kita, itu bidang. Jadi yang korban adalah itu. Nah, saya selalu melihat energi seni sudah diciptakan ya, baik oleh Bertolt Brecht, oleh Kiai Haji Hasan Mustafa, penyair Sunda, oleh Rendra, oleh Putu Wijaya, dan sebagainya. Coba baca seni-seni budaya itu tuh dan tradisi kita. Saya kira itu, Willy ya. Saya kira mungkin kita harus kontemplasi di tengah-tengah 2 tahun kita berada dalam situasi pandemi ini. Menarik sekali kalau kita merenungkan berbagai halnya ya, untuk proses perubahan lebih baik. Terima kasih.
Yeah, I will try to summarize what Pak Tisna said. Pak Tisna mentioned 2 examples. So Ari already helped with the translation in the chat box. So I will summarize a little bit. Pak Tisna took 2 samples. First about corn, and then the second about rivers. So for the corn, nowadays, generation nowadays with technology and segmented education, discipline and everything stuff, they give a corn, a piece of corn, and then they didn't know what to do with this corn, to eat or raw, or to make something, but actually this corn in the daily life, it can be anything in traditional life in Indonesia. It can be maizena, it can be food, it can be with the rice as well. That's the sample of the corn. And then the second sample is about a river next to ITB. It called the Cikapundung River. So in ITB, there's so many disciplines that talk about water resources, but actually this river next to ITB, it's just dirty and not preserved well, the rivers. So everyone said inside the campus, well, our discipline is about the water, not about that river. And other disciplines said almost the same. So Tisna trying to look at the daily life of Indonesian actually living with the nature, especially in tradition. There's science in it, in that daily life as well. There's technology as well, but suddenly the modern paradigm thought that it was a tradition, we must leave that. Tisna said, oh, we must go back to this daily life. So at the end, Tisna was mentioned about art. So in this pandemic era, art's supposed to be like a reflection to all of this stuff. So art supposed to be like by itself is interdiscipline. That's what I think Tisna want to describe. Thank you. Probably Rod want to add something before Syaiful about the gap.
Yeah, I've just been typing something into the chat there. I think one of this whole sense of specialization that we encounter more and more, as particularly as technology develops, I think, and as politics develop, is in one way enlightening, but also it's of individual perspectives, but it is also separating. And one of the values of interdisciplinary art and design is that it can allow bridges to be built, or at least the start of reaching out across those gaps. Perhaps it's a particular period of our time. I'm not sure. That's a very sort of speculative comment. But it does seem to be a mood to try and build connections around those differences, which I think has been made more apparent by just a rapid explosion of communications technologies. I mean, we are all just so exposed to so much information. It's difficult to know how to filter it. That seems to be the challenge of dealing with knowledge these days, for me at least. But at the same time, those same technologies also facilitate groups, as we've seen through development of social media, where issues and people can connect. So I don't know, I think I am feeling optimistic that might happen, but I do think that arts and design, the imaginary aspect of art and design, and the curiosity really has a role to play there.
But I think it's true, and I what's interesting is that science is about building a framework for truth, and it's a different kind of truth. It's about understanding the building blocks of the world around us, and it's not a bad truth. It does allow us to understand ourselves in terms of health, environment, and of course humans will always pervert that in some way if they can. But what art does, it creates a nuanced sense of ourselves. It's a nuanced truth. It doesn't have to be this factualized it's not the speaker for science. We're not illustrating science. And that's where art is so beautiful and powerful. Like looking at Syaiful's work, the nuanced idea of the microscopic walls of moss and algae that respond to his environment. I mean, that must be what you do, Syaiful, with your work, when you're looking down into the microscope and thinking about those microscopic worlds. You're going beyond what we can see, but we still sense it in our environment. Is that the nuance that you are looking for?
Yes, it's true, Erica. I can see what I want to see from the microorganisms, like perilaku. What's perilaku? Sorry, can I answer in Indonesian?
Attitude.
Yeah. Behavior. Yeah, it's like the opposite behaviors. It's like a behavior from the microorganism and then behavior from the micro one, and how to relate with the environment.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You're really thinking about how the world connects around us and how we interact with it. And I think, you're coming at it from both a scientific perspective and also an artistic perspective, but also deeply embedded in your own culture as well. And the tropics, and thinking about the different kind of environment you live in. And I think that is where science and art and that nexus between those two aesthetics really starts to take hold, and your work is so powerful in that way, those walls of moss, and I'm sure other people agree with me as well.
Yes, so we move to the next question.
Yeah, so the next question is coming from another one of our faculty members. It's from Akbar Adi. It's actually a question for Rod, but probably Syaiful could also share his views regarding this question. He said, I'm thinking about the idea of bridging science and technology with craft and art. It is still a strange idea for some people, especially in ceramic, where most of ceramic artists and craftsmen seem to be still stuck in conventional method of production. Often this kind of interdisciplinary projects still have a huge gap in terms of it being difficult for most people to apply in everyday life and utilize it as a profitable commodity. May I know your opinion regarding this matter, and is it necessary to reduce this gap? And I think, if I may add to it, it's also an interesting sort of a turn that we have because of the, more powerful kind of concepts outside of the education. Education becomes a business, and also, the research that we do and all the community service that we do is also valued in monetary terms. So I guess if you would like to comment on that, of course, Tisna and also Bu Erica might also comment on that. Maybe Syaiful, you would like to go first this time, maybe?
Thanks for the question, Akbadi. It's nice to see you here. Look, it's a complicated one, I think, because I think the gap that you talk about in the question is it's not just economic, it's cultural, it's attitudinal, it's quite a complex thing. But I think to directly answer your questions, I don't think that necessarily everything has to become commercialized in order to appreciate the value of the principles behind building links between old and new, different perspectives from across a range of issues. I think there's this idea in technology, like there is in economics, that eventually technology will trickle down. And in some cases that happens, in some cases that doesn't happen. I think one of the interesting things about this, the field of 3D printing in particular, is how it became so popularized so quickly, and it did actually trickle down quite comparatively quite quickly, and the equipment became relatively affordable. So in the case of ceramics practice, a 3D printer will probably cost you less than a pottery wheel now. And that is that, tools are always necessary in certain practices, but there are other ways of bridging that gap, that through community access to those sorts of tools and equipment and the values that are associated with that. And the makerspace movement, which rose out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was really philosophically at its root an ideological making, crafting space, I suppose you would say. And it was directed to try and establish, I think, it was much a political experiment in a way, a socio-political experiment, as it was a technological experiment. And I think that's had some really interesting spin-offs. One of them has been to engage people in practices that normally are not seen within the field. So in my experience, for example, people that are working with new technologies in ceramics are normally not from the traditional ceramic background, but they're coming from other fields such as architecture, biology, engineering. And that itself creates this opportunity for interdisciplinary practice through that broader and differentiated audience.
Thank you, Rod, for the answer. Mas Syaiful, mungkin bagaimana tuh kalau misalnya di yayasan Lokus ya, bertemu itu kan orang banyak ya, dari berbagai disiplin, terus ketemu dengan masyarakatnya, kira-kira gimana tuh menyampaikan hal itu, apa yang ditemukan, atau misalnya dari karya Mas Syaiful aja, dari itu lukisan tapi dengan fungus and microorganism, bagaimana kira-kira cara untuk berdekatan dengan masyarakat dan membagi ilmunya gitu kurang lebih?
Ya tentunya itu sebuah tantangan terbesar mungkin bagi kita, bagaimana menyampaikan apa konteks dari ide atau dari karya, terutama mungkin buat yang di luar dari bidangnya. Tapi sejauh pengalaman saya dalam berinteraksi dengan beberapa riset yang saya lakukan itu, mengenal lebih daripada budayanya, itu sangat membantu. Itu luar biasa membantu bagi kita buat sebelum kita bertemu dengan beberapa audiens, terutama yang di luar bidang. Dan ini menarik sebenarnya ketika kita bicara konteks di Indonesia. Ini jadi Indonesia bisa jadi case study yang sangat bagus karena kita dengan beragam macam budayanya, beragam macam perilakunya, dan beragam macam setelahnya itu saya pikir pertanyaan tadi bisa menjadi sebuah riset menarik terkait kerja-kerja interdisiplin, saya pikir. Dalam konteks kita memiliki potensi di sana, keragaman budaya. Kalau menurut kita sepakat bahwa mempermudah cara itu adalah mendekati secara budaya, secara cultural ya. Jadi kita tidak akan pasti ada komunikasi yang lebih dekat melalui budaya dan lebih diterima oleh bersama. Seperti itu dari saya.
Okay, I'm just asking Syaiful about his Locus Foundation. Yeah, they create something from let's say multidiscipline, and how it approach society and stuff. So Syaiful said that Indonesia it's very good field to study these interdisciplinary things, because in Indonesia there's a vast and the culture variety of culture is very diverse. So he and his foundation usually take a look at how the custom or culture of the community, and then from there he try to, let's say, explain things that actually, like Paktisna said before, in community, in tradition community or cultural in Indonesia, actually they all already set in a way of collective, and also might be said already in the multidiscipline activity. So probably that what I can summarize.
Yes, it's true. And then from Miss Erika, yeah, sharing knowledge. Yes, it's true. So we can learn so many knowledge from the every culture, from the tradition activity. It's the traditional community, something like that. It's true.
Okay, there's a question from the floor. Pak Wawan Hussein, if you have question, please.
Thank you very much. I'm more than happy to be with you all. Beautiful soul, I would say. Let me read my own Eureka. Can joy and joyfulness be measured and calculated? As Tisna's soil is thirsty, drinking water from the sky and blessed, and yet they both, joyfulness and joy, exist within the scientists and artists, so called. Can the very beauty of the music be justified as Garibaldi's tubifex is dancing in motion, as his lesions aging and faded, as flame is moving in the air? Where is the heat in the kiln? Parod, postpartum, postmortem, perfected, micro, macro, perfected. Be the paradigms of both science and arts grow gracefully in search of universal core, the unfinished discussion, and yet always challenging as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Wawan Hussein. Actually, Pak Wawan Hussein is one of the Bandung performer artists.
Thank you, Pawan.
Atur nuhun, Pak Wawan. So,
Sami-sami.
so actually, probably what Pak Wawan Hussein have said, close our session ya Mbak Ari ya.
Yes. So I guess to conclude, I mean, I really cannot conclude this sort of like in very exciting this dialogue, because I'm afraid I think when I conclude this dialogue, then the dialogue ends. I don't want it to end. And I guess a lot of people in the audience have the same feeling, and Bachai has just mentioned a very powerful statement also in the chat box, that interdisciplinarity on its own is already complex, and when we bring the intercultural together within the interdisciplinary, we have even more work to do. But on the other hand, the complexity is also our strength in art, and we celebrate complexity. We resist having things oversimplified for us, and that in itself is I think an inspiration that I personally would want to take home with me, to kind of like sit with all this curiosities and knowledge that I have today. So thank you very much personally for sharing it, and also thank you for all the speakers, not only from this afternoon or evening sessions, but also from the morning sessions. I still see Ibu Nana and also Ibu Ana. Thank you very much for tuning in, and also for all the attendees for also contributing to the discussion since this morning. It has been eye-opening yet very grounding for myself. I hope this collaborative effort between ITBA and ANU can be continued to the future. And please look forward to more exciting collaborations. I'm Ardhana Rieswari, and signing out as your MC. Please stay safe and well wherever you are. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and good night.